Board members, if we can get you to take your seats, we'll get started. Want to welcome everyone to our board meeting today. On the safety side, if there's an emergency, the exits or take these doors right here to my right, go in the hallway, right, left, and you're outside. And restrooms are right through these doors across from the hall. So I want to welcome everyone here today. We've got quite an agenda today. Appreciate everyone being here. First thing on our agenda, and we'll dive right into it, is an information item, and it's recess best practices. And I'll have Board Member Earl introduce who we have here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to let them kind of tell a little about themselves real quick.
Whatever
Jenny Earl,
you decide.
District 1, yes. And so I'm just going to say really quick that it's been an honor to work with these ladies and the groups that we've worked with. It hasn't just been this group here. These are just some individuals that we thought would be able to articulate some of the reasons behind the best practices. So we're going to introduce ourselves and then share. We've just got a few slides because we want to answer any questions that anybody has or any concerns. That type of a thing. So anyways, we'll go ahead and start right here.
Great. My name is Allie Teller. I am a specialist in the curriculum department in Canyon School District.
Good morning. My name is Jody Parker, and I am the Health and Physical Education Specialist here at USBE.
My name is Sarah Hodson. I'm the Executive Director of Get Healthy Utah and was recently the Chair of Action for Healthy Kids.
Before we kind of move on to the next slide, I just want to very quickly explain how this even became something that we decided to work on. Almost 2 years ago now, a coalition called Action for Healthy Kids, which involves many community groups throughout the state. We have Department of Health people there. We have Get Healthy Utah is part of this. And many organizations, American Heart Association, that are all Primary Children's Hospital. I mean, we can go on and on and on. It's a really large coalition of people that are interested in the health outcomes of our youth. And about 2 years ago, they decided to do just kind of an investigation, a study, collect data on how recess is in our schools. And we'll talk about those results in a minute, but when we got those results, we kind of realized that there are some disparities. So the group, Action for Healthy Kids, started kind of putting together what are best practices, what does the research say out there? And they started collecting it. And then they actually came to me as staff of the board and asked if we could present to the board what a best practice could look like. And that's when they also then invited Board Member Earl to kind of champion this guideline. So that's just kind of some background for you. So you know this, like we didn't just like, let's do this. It's been a very thoughtful, about 2 years worth of work, so.
And along that lines, I know there's been some questions in the public about this being a structured or kind of a forced type of a recess where kids have to go out, they have to do certain activities and certain things. When I came to the meetings in the spring, that was one of my first concerns was, okay, well, I want kids to be able to choose, go out and do what they want to do. If they want to do creative free play, I hope we're not creating something that does not allow that to happen. And as I listened to the research, as I looked at things, that's not what this is. This is merely saying, this is what best practice looks like. This is what provides opportunity for successful, or I say successful, but for active recess to take place. And so, anyway, so we're going to put these best practices forward. This isn't a shall, this is a may. These are things that the research is showing create environments where active recess can take place. So, oh, and then this is me. So I'll go right there. So I got to see if I can visually see this here. Okay, so on our strategic plan under Safe and Healthy Schools, strategy B, increase adoption of evidence-based student health and wellness practices. So this falls right in line with our strategic plan. It also, when you look at our our portrait of a graduate, and when you talk about youth having healthy environments, and as they are growing and maturing, to be able to make decisions that are healthy for them, this goes right in line with that. So, okay, so provide. Maybe I'll slide that over a little bit, so I don't have to. So what is the purpose? It's to provide elementary schools with best practice guidelines for recess. These are things that have been shown to be effective. Eliminate unsound educational practices. It's interesting, I think it was KSL that ran a little clip on this probably about 3 weeks ago or so, but I had a neighbor that dropped off a little Christmas gift, you know, the little bread or whatever, and he said, I'm so glad you're doing something like this because my granddaughter, she's a fidgety kid and she often misses recess because she's fidgety in class and she has to stay in to finish up her, her schoolwork or whatever in place of going out. And he says she needs to go out. That's the reason why she's fidgeting. She needs to go out and be part of the environment. And then, of course, equal access for all students to participate in active recess. Anyways, this is just a necessary part of the school day. And we passed a rule yesterday that said it shall be included. And so part of that shall be included is these are some successful practices.
So in your backup, you have the document that we have created, the best practices for recess guideline. Within that, and this is just kind of the structure, so there's some background information that just kind of just says what the whole purpose is. And then we have definitions for you, so active recess, organized recess, structured recess. Structured recess is a thing, but that's really, truly, structured recess is when a student is not doing well with the freedom, and so a student, so that they still get recess, they can still participate in recess, but that particular student would maybe have a more structured plan where they don't necessarily have all the free choices. They still get to have activity, but because maybe they're unsafe, they have more structure around them. So maybe they would walk out of recess just slightly after other people, or walk out with their teacher, and then maybe they're with an adult all the time, and that would be structure. Active is students get the choice and they have play, but their choices are, and they can be as creative as they want, but whatever that play is, it's active. They're moving, they're moving their bodies, they're getting blood back into their bodies from sitting all day, and that's active, and that's kind of the difference there. Organized is where there's a variety of activities and games that they can choose from, and so those are the differences. Our best practice is recommending active recess. We have a bunch of frequently asked questions and answers to that. Then we have just some research with best practices. We have a model policy. We gave examples of policies around the state that are very successful. And then we also gave resources with links for more information if any school administrator, individual teacher wants to kind of dive in and do some research on their own, or they want to see samples, they want game ideas, that's on there as well. So why is recess so important? It's because it serves as a necessary break from the rigors of a concentrated academic learning in the classroom. So recess, and this is the research shows that recess improves physical activity. That 100% makes sense, right? Academic achievement, including memory, attention, and concentration. So when students are able to get up and move, their learning actually improves as well. So does their on-task behavior in the classroom. So our wiggly kids, when we take away recess, it actually makes them more wiggly, and they're more disruptive. So when we give them these breaks, these regular breaks, and aren't withholding them because they're wiggly, then they actually behave better for the rest of the day. And then also their social and emotional development improves.
Okay, so our model policy includes the recommendation is at least 20 minutes of daily recess for all elementary school students, prohibiting the withholding of physical activity as punishment. Physical activity cannot be used as a punishment either. Have you ever had that done? We're gonna go run a few laps, right? So encourage recess before lunch. This is just an encouragement. Each school is gonna be structured a little different. So there are benefits for different reasons. Some of those might even be the children actually eat more if you do the recess before lunch and then they aren't in a hurry to grab their donut or whatever, do you know what I mean? And then race out to the the soccer field or whatever. So there's some strategic reasons for that, but that would be based on a local decision. And we're also encouraging active recess, where students are physically active during the scheduled time. And there's strategies, and that's where there are strategies, and Ally will hit on that in a minute, that create that success for schools and for the leadership there. So.
And Board Member Earl asked me to just talk for a minute about the survey that we did, and particularly about the withholding recess, what we found in our survey. So as Jody mentioned, in 2018, Action for Healthy Kids did a survey of schools where we sent an email to principals and then followed up with the non-responders and talked to the office staff. And we asked, do they hold recess, when are recesses held? And then we asked specifically about, do they withhold recess for either punishment or for remediation? And what we found is that the majority of schools in Utah do withhold recess from students for one of those two reasons, which is a concern because we believe that students should have the opportunity during the day to be active and to go outside and have a break from their academic activities. But even more concerning is when we looked at the data and compared Title I and non-Title I schools, what we found was in Title I schools, 72% of Title I schools withhold students from recess for one of those two reasons, compared to only 58% of non-Title I schools. So this to us seemed like an issue of equity, that all students in the state are not having equal access to opportunities for recess. So we found that very concerning in terms of the withholding recess. And I'm happy later to answer questions about other parts of the survey if you're interested, but that's the piece that I think was really stood out to us.
So in Canyon School District, I am a specialist in the curriculum department. Just like we have math specialists and science specialists, my focus is on health and PE and recess. So I support training and professional development for all of our lunchtime recess aides and our physical education staff. So we have partnered with a nonprofit organization for about the last 8 years to just really put some intentionality behind our recess time. So like I said at the beginning of the school year, we do an intensive 2-day training for all of our recess aides and physical education staff, and they learn the best practices of implementing recess. They learn how to play games in a more inclusive and positive and healthy way, and then they support students in bringing those games out to recess where they can practice the positive social emotional skills that they learn during the PE time. So there's a picture up there. That's a photo of one of our staff professional developments. Those are all adults that are playing a tag game there, and they're learning just how to make tag games really inclusive in that picture. So we also use a validated evaluation tool called the Great Recess Framework. So along with our PBIS team, we go out to schools in the fall and spring and evaluate recess to see what the safety and health looks like. And then we're able to kind of use that tool to then coach and consult with the principals and the recess staff and the PE teachers on how to make recess even more safe and healthy and inclusive. So we've seen a lot of benefits from investing in that training and that time with those folks that are listed up there. We know that students are resolving their conflicts at recess a little bit better by getting that instruction during PE time and then having it reinforced out at recess time. We know that their physical activity increases quite a bit when they have access to learning the games and then taking them outside. We also do a leadership program with our 4th and 5th grade students where they get training and then they act as junior coaches out at recess. So they're a peer leader and they support gameplay and conflict resolution with their peers and younger students. And then we've just seen a decrease in recess injuries. So we've been doing this with all of our elementary schools. We've really integrated it into our MTSS system, and we really know that and have seen that when you put some intentionality behind recess, that there can be a lot of benefits for students.
So I just want to tell you real quick, I kind of said, prove it to me. And I went out and viewed recess at one of these schools, and this is what I saw. You have the children coming out. There's accessibility to the different balls or equipment that they need. The rules to the games are laminated and clipped on. So if a child has a that's not how that's, that's the double bounce or I don't know, whatever. They can go right up, the children themselves. This is an adult having to get involved. The children go over and say, look, here's the rules. And then there's a simple way, it's one time, not four, not best out of, one time. And that's simply, it's understood. The winner of that, if there's a disagreement, so that we can get kids back playing the game. And so it's just providing them with these little intentional things. And it's not complicated. It's very simple. These little intentional things actually create the environment where children can resolve their conflicts within one another, or with leadership, and youth leadership comes in and help. It helps develop just these leadership skills. So it was really fun to go out and actually see this in practice and see what was going on. And so anyways, I would just, we'll open it up for any questions that you have.
Yeah, so that does conclude our presentation. And
Okay, questions? Board Member Davis. Oh. There isn't any motion. This is information. Okay, Dr. Dixon.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really exciting as I've visited schools where I see opportunities for structured recess and more inclusivity. Kids are just happier, and you see fewer and fewer students standing on the sidelines and feeling isolated. So thank you for this great work. I do have a question about, and this might be particular to Canyons or just best practices in general. As a principal, I was really proud of my teachers who integrated movement into content. So I know this is focused on recess, but is there anything you're doing in Canyons or that you talk about in health standards or in Healthy Utah where we encourage and give ideas for teachers to incorporate movement in mathematics or English language arts or other content?
Yeah, so within our professional development series, I do some training that is available to teachers to include, we call them brain breaks in the classroom. And there are a bunch of resources with games that they can play that are just quick, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, little movement activities. So I do a training on that. And then I've also supported our other specialists in including those brain breaks into the training they do with teachers so that it's modeled in all of the training that we do as a best practice for teachers to include in their instruction. So, yeah.
I can talk about state. I can talk about statewide. So, Superintendent Dixon, statewide, my battery. You don't get to see that beautiful picture anymore. My battery just died. Statewide, we do trainings on, we call it Healthy Bodies, Healthy Minds, and it's a state conference that we've had for several years that involves every LEA is invited. And last year we had over half, and it was really great because it's a one-day event. But we give out we call them flip books, but they are brain break books, and they are 5-minute classroom activities. And within this also, it gives you ideas for if you're gonna do like a quiz, right? So like A, B, C, D, and you have it up on the screen, instead of like the kids writing A or having like their little electronic device that like gives them an A, they're standing up. And they jump into an A, or they jump into a B, or they jump into and then they can do the same thing with like rock, paper, scissors. So they can rock, paper, scissors with their feet instead of their hands. And it just gives all these really simple ideas of how to involve your core subjects through movement. There is math and mathematics, that's an actual brand name. But we can do movement through science, we can do movement in literacy. We have a great partner that teaches how to move through storytelling. So the students are reading a story, but they're moving and acting the story. So when the tree sways, the kids all sway. So it's a way to get up and active during the classroom as well, yes. So we do have the flip book linked on this practice guideline, but that's the only really mention of in the classroom because this one really was more about recess.
Follow up?
Yes, if I may, thanks. I would just encourage you to attend that conference. It's generally held in June.
It's typically in June. We
June.
are on hold this year because there's a national conference.
Okay,
Shape America's coming and we can't.
okay. So in the future, because I know you'll all be here again, we'll make sure that you get that information. It's a wonderful conference. It's very energetic, and it's well-attended every year. And we also give out an award named for one of our former employees who was so invested in making sure that elementary teachers especially engaged in movement in the classroom, and so Linda Main. And they walk away with not only flip books, but equipment for classrooms. So I'm really proud of Jody and her involvement in this conference. It's really well-respected and well-attended by our LEAs, so we'll make sure you get that information when it comes around again.
Absolutely.
Board Member Newell?
Thank you for doing this. Couple questions. How do you separate recess from PE?
So physical education is a core required class. So you actually have class time that is physical education, and that's completely separate than recess. Recess is a structured break. Physical education has core standards, and it has the educator that is structurally leading students through those standards, and they're learning intentional skills or a sport or about fitness principle. So we do have core standards, K through 6.
Oh,
For
K
physical
through
education,
6.
yes.
Okay,
And then
excellent.
there's middle school, high school as well, but the recess is K through 6. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's physical education standards. And
Wonderful.
it's a separate class.
Great. So they do get a little bit more exercise. Second question is, how are you going to monitor the educators with not holding students back from recess?
So well, this is just a best practice, so there wouldn't really be monitoring. It would be their local wellness policy. Schools, they have to have a wellness policy right now, and part of a wellness policy has to include physical activity. Recess is part of that. So we are just giving a guideline of what would be a best practice within their own within their own wellness policy. It would be up to school administration to monitor if their own policy is being withheld or being. Thank you.
Yes.
Pregnancy brain, I forget words.
I asked that question because of the disparity that you mentioned to us
Yes.
between Title I and non-Title I schools. If that's the case, there has to be some semblance of monitoring to make sure that
Yeah.
we shift that.
Yep. And we don't have a rule,
Okay.
so we don't have monitoring. We are just trying to
Best-
give them something to go off of. If we provide a resource for our LEAs to use in their policy when they're creating their own, then the hope is they'll see the research and they'll want to use it. They really like documents we produce. They really like when there's support from this agency. So, but by being able to do this, we're hoping it'll really benefit students in the end.
Great. Thank you.
I was just going to say, Sean, that I think, our board member Newell, that I think part of the reason of presenting this here as an informational piece is so that as you go out to your districts and as you talk with LEAs, that you can say, do you know, there's this great thing, that there's great best practice when it comes to recess, so that we can engage with our local entities with this, encourage them to get on board with things that are best practice, so.
Board Member Belknap?
Thank you, Chair. I actually have several questions, but I'll just do a couple, and then if I could
Let's
reconnoiter
limit
back.
it to 2, please.
Or 12. My first one's actually rhetorical, but how do you make a rock out of your feet? I get the paper and scissors, but I can't figure the rock. I've been doing.
So rock you are feet together.
Okay, all right.
Paper, you go feet apart, and I'm like doing it under the table like you can see me. And then scissors, you go front and back.
All front and back, not
Yeah.
cross. Okay. I kind of figured 2 out. Sorry, Chair.
Your next question? Very informative, thank you.
Pretend like that wasn't one of mine. Okay, so I have a question about the training, the cost to that, equipment and games that will happen. Even the term structured PE, having a teacher walk them out, then where is the teacher's break time? You know, they already are required by bell time to do their bodily functions, and if they're, so that's my question is.
I can speak at least to how we've done this in Canyons
Well,
District.
Canyons is big, and Canyon has more money than some of our little districts.
Right. So at least for the structured piece, we really try to use our social emotional staff for that, whether it's counselors, social workers. We have behavior assistants in our schools. So I think a lot of schools are getting funding and pushing for the social emotional staff. So that's who we really use to support structured recess. The training, we try to see recess is a really important curricular piece of the day. So just like we have training for math and for English language arts, we don't have necessarily as much, but we have training for them at the beginning of the school year as well. There are, so equipment-wise, do you want to speak to
Yeah.
that at all?
As Superintendent Dixon suggested earlier, we do have that conference that we put on annually, and every teacher walks away with hundreds of dollars of equipment. I mean, it's massive amounts. Department of Health has been so great at getting these great big bundles of equipments. We've given away hula hoops, we've given away playground balls, we've given away entire sets of recess equipment. And so equipment-wise, that's something that we've really been successful at helping with. Training as well. There's also a lot of free resources, and there's grants. Department of Health always has a grant. Primary Children's always has a grant. Like these organizations always are giving grants, and I'm emailing them out to administrators. So that really is. But the training itself, there are a lot of free resources. Again, I'm going to pick on Department of Health. They do, with their own education specialists, they will go out and they loan equipment out, and they also do free training for staff, for school staff.
Okay, can I ask my real other second one?
Probably easier for you to just ask than
Oh, okay.
ask the question instead of ask
To
permission.
ask the question to ask? Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't convolute this idea with yesterday's idea of having recess count as part of our 990 hours. And so my question is, do you see a time when this is going to be a requirement that we are training people to have structured recess?
We're not recommending structured recess at all. We're recommending active recess.
Yeah, and I wrote those two down, and I
Okay.
still can't figure the difference between active and organized, but
So I can address this just a little bit. So, and it kind of goes back to even your previous question. You're going to have adults out with the children when they're at recess, right? I mean, it's not like you let them out, then people take a break, and then, the kids go. There's someone out there. So it's being very intentional about what's going on out there. And sometimes it's doing some training at the beginning of the year. This is how we resolve conflicts. This is how the games are played. So it does take some deliberateness to it. But then once that deliberateness is done, children are left to decide what they will do. And they're left to choose. Am I going to do the creative play over here? Am I going to, you know what I mean? Am I going to do Foursquare? Whatever they choose to do. But they've got the understanding of the rules. They know how to resolve conflicts. And then the staff that's out there, whoever that is, whether that's a resource person or a recess person or like someone they've hired for that, or if it's a teacher, I don't know, however the school structures it. It just is it's intentional or deliberate that they're creating environments for success. A structured recess would be more, this is what you have to do within these, more confined. Does that make sense? This still leaves that choice up to students. And there is a lot of free resources too, because that was a concern. How will districts afford this? How are we gonna, if we force this on, which it isn't a forced, it's, if you want to do this, you can do this. This is what it looks like. And this is the research behind it, and this is why it's successful. This is why there's less bullying. This is why there's less injuries. Anyways, did that kind of answer that question? Okay.
Okay. We have 4 more board member questions or comments, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm the clock guy today, I guess. Board member Davis.
I guess that it answered a little bit of my question that this is optional for LEAs, optional for teachers, optional for students. This is because, like you, I'm getting emails saying, I don't have time to go to the bathroom from teachers. And so I want to just make sure that we understand that that's clear. This is a best practice and an option. And I just want to add quickly that the other day, in December, my daughter, who's 11 in 6th grade, missed her recess to practice violin, to play violin for the school singing, Christmas singing thing. And I said, oh, that's a bummer. I know you really like recess. And she does fine in school. I've never really thought about it. And she said, Mom, it's not about liking recess. She said, I have to have recess to function. She said, it doesn't work for me up here for the rest of the time in school if I don't get recess. It doesn't work. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, this is so bizarre. We're having this conversation because we're talking about this in our board meeting next month. I said, do you want to come and speak? And she said, well, I would, but I wouldn't want people to think that I was influencing your vote. So, this is my little 6th grader, but that little personal experience hit home to me a little bit more that my son's fine without recess all day. He really is fine. But my daughter's not. We have a lot of kids who aren't, a lot of kids who need it for basic functioning and learning when they go back in. So thanks for doing the research and bringing all this to our attention.
Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. I too got several emails about this. And I'm hoping maybe you can sort a little bit of this out for me. Some of the questions are about recess becoming instructional time. And if it becomes instructional time, does it mean that a teacher cannot withhold kids from recess as a punishment if it is considered instructional time? First question.
That is the recommendation, is to not hold recess. This is important for them. Now, what that also means is that schools and educators need to find a time when they can do what they need to do, if it's a follow through on things. So once again, it's intentional, doing things intentionally. This, just like was said here, children need that break. We need the break sometimes. So yes, I think
So
it's.
I understand that part.
Okay, so what am I
My question
missing?
is about, is there in state law or rule something that says recess can be counted as instructional time, and thereby it takes away the opportunity to withhold recess as a punishment? So is there a law or rule that
We
governs
just passed
that?
the rule yesterday.
So I went through and looked for it, and I couldn't find it. Will you read?
It's not, yeah. But
But there's nothing in the rule that says recess being considered instructional time means that a teacher cannot withhold recess as a punishment. They still can do that.
we're back to best
we don't want-
practices, but
yeah,
it's
we
not
don't want them to
in
do
law
that,
or
but-
rule anywhere that I know of, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
But
Well,
that's why we're doing the best practices, so that we can find better ways to work with that, so.
Okay. The other question was if it is to be counted as instructional time, must it be structured recess?
And I think we've answered that, no. Intentional is best practice, but not, yeah.
Okay.
An active recess.
And they wanted me to discern what's the difference between structured recess and PE. They thought that sounded like it would be the same
Yeah.
thing.
And that was the question that I answered for Board Member Newell. Physical education is a core required class. It is a class time. Students will go to the gym with a trained physical educator and go through the physical education standards. There's K-6 physical education standards that this board passed in 2017. The revised, I mean, we've had PE standards for years. But then not withholding, correct. Yeah, not withholding, yeah. So physical education is completely separate than recess. And even if a student needed the alternative to active recess and was using structured recess, that's still not physical education time. Because physical education time, just like math or language arts or art or music, it's time in the day, or however the school does it. I mean, if they integrate subjects together, right, there's class time, but then the whole class goes down to the gym or it goes outside when weather permits, and they are with a physical education teacher teaching them the PE standards.
So I'll just give you the feedback that what I was hearing from people, they very much were against the structured recess. They were against structured recess because it was requiring the teacher to give up the only potty break they have for the day to do that with the kids. And they were worried about it being counted as instructional time, thereby making recess having to be structured. So that was the upset that I was hearing
I
from
think
people.
what happened was media took several clips and put some together, and it sounded more like that's what we were doing. So, and I think the public was concerned about that, and that makes sense. We were trying to be very articulate here that that's not what that was, so that we want all teachers to be able to access the restroom, so, and do what they normally do. I'm just saying, a lot of times that's a break they need too. So, but you have someone out, anyways, I won't go into that. It's intentional.
Can I add one thing about? So the structured recess piece, if you look at the definitions, is really getting back to the equity, and that we're trying not to withhold recess for punishment. But when we say that you can't withhold, or we would like you to not withhold recess for punishment, people want an alternative. So what can we do then? How can we support kids in still accessing recess if they really struggle with behavior out there? And that is when you would put into place like a structured recess plan with that one student or that handful of students to really try and teach them the social and emotional skills, conflict resolution, so that they can access recess in a normal way. And that's where we get back to that equity piece of really trying to not withhold recess. That's the intention of the structured recess. It's a temporary thing to give them the skills to be able to get back to a general recess.
Dr. Dixon?
Just have to clarify, I want to make sure that we're not walking away, or the public is not hearing structured recess as a punishment. Salt Lake School District is doing a phenomenal job using equity as a platform and having structured recess for all students in all schools. And I would really encourage you to go see it. When you interview the students in the elementary schools who are engaged in structured recess, they will tell you it has made all the difference for them in conflict resolution in their neighborhoods, in their classroom, and all students are engaged. So when you hear that term, it should not be a punishment term, and it's a really proactive best practice. In Salt Lake District, they have hired people to do this, so the teachers still have their recess break. So I just didn't want anybody to walk away confusing that the structured recess is some sort of punishment or a specific way of engaging in recess.
Board Member Bolter?
So as I'm reading active recess, my mind's going back to when I once upon a time volunteered over at George Washington Academy in St. George, Utah. And it was really interesting because they took the group of us parents that were volunteering and they took us outside and they said, okay, here is a section where four squares is set up and this is how you play the game. This is where, if kids want to play wall ball, this is where they would do it. If they want to do hula hoops, the hula hoops will be over here, and we've got different games they can do with the hula hoops, or they can do whatever. They had a map of the United States, that there was a game that they could play with it or do whatever. And then, of course, everything outside of those areas was free play that a child could go. It was really nice to know that, because if I did see a child that was kind of off on their own, and there were people playing four squares, but there was only 3 of them, then I could ask the child, hey, they only have 3 for 4 squares. Do you want to go over there? So I like that where they can do free play, but then there's games set up and the adults know how to play it, and they're watching, trying to make sure that nobody is left out. I do, because now it is part of the instructional time and some of Board Member Cannon's concerns that were brought up. And I do understand that if there's a child that's like maybe constantly fighting, perhaps they need to be like walked out, and then maybe the teacher could say, hey, why don't you play wall ball today? You know, why don't you? And I'm understanding with that. I just worry that we don't eventually move to now making recess a structured time of play, where now there's going to be a planned activity that all the kids have to engage in. That's my only concern, but I do like the active recess, and I saw it in play at George Washington Academy before this was even a thing, I guess. And so I am liking that. That's just my one concern, is that I don't want it to eventually flow into now here's structured, and then we add more stuff to the teacher's to-do list.
Well, I don't think that's being proposed right now, and there's no action, so I think we're safe to say that's how it is. So I appreciate the information that you brought forth, and there's going to be more discovery, I'm sure, and more questions asked. And I thought you've done a good job of introducing where we're
So
at.
this should be posted today or within the next couple of days so that people have a way to access that, the public and such, so.
That is correct. So, thank you for your time. Okay, we are a little bit out of whack on our schedule this morning. We did kind of have a time. Oh, yes. Is she here? I didn't see her. Okay, we're going to jump to the public comment real fast that was missed yesterday from a miscommunication. Is Duke Johnson and Tracy Collins here? Will you come right up here to the mic? We had some confusion on that yesterday, so this will be like 3 minutes here. Okay. If you'll,
Okay, yes, we can do it in 3 minutes, so.
Okay.
Duke Johnson, I am the Associate Director of the Clark Planetarium.
And I'm Tracy Collins, School Programs Manager at the Natural History Museum of Utah.
Okay, and we'd just like to say a few words about the IC groups. We are here not for our own institutions today, but to represent all of the IC organizations, and those are the ones that provide the science enhancement. We have some handouts. If that would be all right, we'd like to pass those around.
if you hand them to Board Member Belknap, please. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Tracy's going to start us off.
All right, so for over 30 years, informal science institutions have partnered with the Utah State Board of Education to provide support for Utah students and teachers. The IC program currently includes 9 line item members and 1 provisional member. We value the partnership with Utah State Board of Education that allows us to serve audiences statewide. The purpose of the program is for informal science organizations through visits to schools, on-site learning, and teacher professional development to provide opportunities for students and teachers to develop and use the knowledge, skills, and science appreciation as defined in the state science standards. The collective objective of IC is to utilize its programming to fulfill local education agencies' need for sustainable and collaborative student learning activities. So last year, the USBE incorporated our request for increased funding to deal with increasing numbers of students and opportunities to support teacher professional development with the adoption of the new science standards. During the last moments of the 2019 legislative session, many line item requests were moved from ongoing support to one-time support.
So now we get to our request. So IC requests moving the IC student outreach provider increase from $200,000 from one-time funding to ongoing funding, and maintaining the RFP pool with the Ogden Nature Center as a provisional member. Funding supports increases the student attendance across the state, and they receive programs that spark their natural curiosity and sense of wonder by providing exciting opportunities to experience science. Statewide outreach grows programs annually to serve Utah's growing population, and IC organizations offer a balanced schedule to ensure that schools receive services equitably and have a collective impact of providing services to all grades.
Thank you. This is a public comment, so your comment's recorded. It's not a discussion item or anything, so thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you
And
for
I
hearing us.
apologize for that confusion
It's okay.
yesterday.
As do we. Thank you.
Okay, Next, I'm going to ask Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones if he will hold off. I know he's camera ready, but the cameras aren't here, so I don't see the news here yet for him. But we do have a guest that, so I want to invite Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings to come up. We're going to go into part of our legislative session preparation. So we have Representative Ballard here, so we're just going to take care of Representative Ballard's piece, and then we'll jump back out, and then we'll come back into the legislative session portion of our meeting. So, welcome. I know you're in caucus meetings in and out, and are you on a pause kind of break, or are you going to sprint back?
But I'll be back, yes. So I really appreciate you allowing me to come in and change the calendar up a little bit and the schedule. And I think it's actually very apropos. We were just discussing in our all-day caucus meeting the importance of our budget and being able to analyze where we are and making sure that we are making our expenditures appropriately and being accountable for that, and the savings that have taken place as we have done that, and requiring of all of our entities that we look at 20% every 5 years. So how does that apply to what this is? One of the very first things I did as a new legislator, because of how important you are to our state, to our education, and where the funding goes, and being able to understand each of the LEAs. And this was the first question that I came and have been spending 2 years to understand the benefits of the systems that we have right now and the challenges associated with the financial information systems. And I know you as a board requested of the legislature not very long ago, just I think it was about 3-4 years ago, an $80 million appropriations to be able to have new information systems for you as a board with USIMS as well as for the LEAs. So we were very grateful last session that we were able to fund for $17 million the USIMS for your board, your staff, to really update, it's now 2020, to be able to be more efficient in real time and collaborating all of the entities that we have. So the rest of this, what's often been referred to the end-to-end financial information system, and spending quite a lot of time with your staff and with many of you, the question was, what is practical on a year-to-year basis, not a big lump sum of $67 million that would be needed, or $63 million, or $40 million. And so this is an opportunity for all of the LEAs to all be able to have the same standards in reporting to you, in their systems, and also being able to take an understanding that there's many in rural Utah or small schools that may have a challenge financially of paying for those information systems that the large districts do. So this is an opportunity for the state to, for us to also be able to help fund for you, for all of the LEAs to be able to be compatible and be able to meet the requirements that you have and that you need. And in speaking with our state treasurer and our state auditor, they are also included in this bill for them to give the input that they need. They were also two of the first people that I spoke with 2 years ago to say, just in general, what are your needs? What do you appreciate about the process? And both of them expressed concerns about the way that they are getting information from some of the LEAs and just the communication. Again, it's having so many different dashboards, so many different programs, and human error of inputting things or trying to incorporate them. And so I think I know that this was discussed, I think, 20 years ago, and the state at the time opted not to have a statewide information system. Well, fast forward to now, it's caught up with us. And so in looking at the what the benefits would be of having you as a state board to decide in rule what is important to you for an information system, and for you to determine that, I do not want you to continue to have to come back to the legislature to say, we have one more thing we want to include. I want to give you the ability, with some parameters that are included here, of you being able to determine what financial systems your entities need. And the flexibility for this is if you as a board determine that there is a particular vendor or that you would like to support as a whole, or to say, here's our standard with some of those guidelines, any of the LEAs that already meet those requirements without being in a specific vendor or program, they do not have to join into what you're doing. If any of the LEAs already meet those standards, then that's great. If any of the LEAs do not, then this bill provides, and we've handed out to you an amendment that we've added to this to be more clear, that the state would be able to grant funds for the training and the transferring over and the information system. Let me just get the exact wording here. For the training, compliance, and the licensure. To help those LEAs be able to get up to speed. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Angie Stallings be able to show where this provides great savings to us as taxpayers and to you as a state board, but also for the across the benefits that will come from you being able to have those standards really met from your LEAs.
So, thank you, Representative Ballard. And I think Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones is going to come up because he is much more familiar with these numbers than I am. I forgot to introduce myself, Angie Stallings, your Deputy Superintendent of Policy. So, but it's projected right there. Is this what you want?
And I'm Representative Melissa Ballard, representing District 20.
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. So what you're seeing right here is the cost calculation based on data that we took from a model LEA that has a system that meets the minimum requirements that you see in the slide previous to this one. So this is the long-term funding support that Representative Ballard was talking about. Market analysis and analysis of our ERP systems says that an ERP typically lasts 7 to 10 years and then major modifications are necessary. So what we did is factoring growth and all of those types of aspects is calculated what the cost would be. There's also data that supports that. Now, this data does come from more of the manufacturing side with enterprise resource planning systems, that the value add or the return on investment of an ERP with the minimum systems or modules that you the minimum modules you see within the system can be up for every dollar that's spent, can lead up to another $7 in either cost, a little over $7 in cost avoidance and or cost savings. So let me just clarify what we mean by cost avoidance. So as you know, there's a lot of subrecipient monitoring going on, and we incur a lot of determinations that expenditures were made unallowably. And then there's these payback options that are not options, but payback amounts that are determined. And so by having, and typically what we attribute these, just as a quick example, these unallowable costs is not necessarily, or unnecessarily, if you will, the individual doing something fraudulent or anything like that. It's a lack of proper systems. Their payroll system resides over here, but their general ledger is over here. They're using spreadsheets, and it's prone to error. So we avoid those kinds of costs, or payback costs, if you will, by virtue of the fact that we're providing standardized systems to the LEAs. So then, two, we also have a lot of cost savings because typically vendors that provide these types of systems, the more that are in their system, the less they charge for the licensure fees. So these are estimates, and they're based on, calculation as if, the LEAs entered into the systems or, had those systems, and it's based on market data. We went out and we researched a lot of different systems because, again, and I think this is a very important piece to add here, is we're not forcing LEAs to abandon their systems. We would like them to configure their systems if they don't have the configuration to do that, but it's more along the lines of a grant program to get them to the standards that are so necessary right now to meet all the requirements for reporting. And to Representative Ballard's point, it bridges all of the different requirements between the different entities, such as the state treasurer and the state auditor's office. So it's a one-team philosophy with the systems provided to the LEAs that make us successful and ultimately result in cost savings that could translate or will translate into more money into the classrooms and for our students. Subject to any questions, did I cover that well enough, ma'am? Or?
Yes, I think one thing that's really important is because that you and our funding would be providing a state licensure, that means that any of the current LEAs that are under the umbrella of a larger licensure, they would be able to keep those funds.
Yes.
So for every $1 million, they would be able to keep $75,000 that they were, this is the average, that they would normally be spending on their own licensure. They get to keep those funds because the state would now be able to get the Walmart pricing for a state licensure for programming. So I think that's a great benefit to each of the LEAs who are already in compliance if they are doing a larger licensure.
And by keeping that money could then get put into the classrooms
Whatever
or
they
for other
want.
purposes towards transportation, things like that. So we anticipate a very significant return on investment should this bill pass.
You ready for some questions or?
I do want to mention two things. One of them is I've spent a lot of time talking with my home district, which is Davis School District. They are very supportive of this. They are one of those LEAs that already meets the requirements at a high standard of reporting. And they are very supportive because they can continue in their current system, but they also acknowledge the need for other LEAs that will need help to meet these requirements. So they are very supportive, as well as Granite School District that I spoke with. And then I think this last calendar year has been challenging for some financial systems of some smaller LEAs. And I think this will help you to be able to have real-time data instead of a few months after a financial crash of particular LEAs or systems that you can help. And that's really, I think, an important role that you have. That's why you are the state school board over all of our education here in Utah, that you are able to step in and help before we have disasters or much larger financial bills that would come that way. And I think this will help that real time in facilitating that. So thank you.
Representative, I want to thank you for your vision on this. You've followed the whole process of USIMS, and now we're into USIMS, and we know as soon as that is completed that all these LEAs have got to dock to the mothership, as we used to say a couple of years ago. That I don't know if that's for the Trekkie people or whatever it was back at the time, but it is a reality that's coming, and there is that need. But at the same time as we were pushing for a complete end-to-end system, the reality was at that time that it wasn't going to get funded. So we're very grateful that we have the USIM, so we get all of our house in order to get ready for the next step. And this is that next step. And it has all the appearance of success on it with option and opportunity for all LEAs to get on board. And then the downside of docking to the mothership is change. I've got to do something. I've got to get ready. I've got to prepare to be efficient. And so this kind of plays into this.
You are the
Hopefully
only participant.
legislature will be on board on this. And then at the same time, we talk in this state about innovation and using technology and best practices, and here we're still kind of a little bit in the dark ages on still dealing with spreadsheets and Excel, in that Excel world of human error. And so I think this kind of plays to where we need to have those efficiencies, have better data. A lot of things what we do is data driven, and but at the same time, it minimizes the risk, opportunity for. It doesn't take away all of the opportunity for failure for these LEAs, but it puts them all on the same playing field, and it does give them an opportunity, provide an opportunity for them to actually get into being fiscally responsible and have that consistency. So it's timely, it's efficient. We're in a real-time world right now, and this certainly would help. So I want to thank you for that work. Now I have some people that have some questions for you or comments. Board Member Bolter.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm looking at the proposed bill that was up there and then the changes that were made in committee. And so is the idea, because I see that there won't be a grant any longer, that it's struck out for award a grant. So is it that you'll earmark basically an amount of money used for this that we will reimburse?
I think
schools,
that's, since
or-
that is pretty new, I think whether it's reimburse or grant, I think is probably whatever's going to be
Could
best
that
for
be
you.
whatever
I'm
we put
totally
in a rule,
flexible with that.
basically?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So instead of telling us how we would do it,
Yeah.
okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I just wanted clarity on that.
So if I may, Chair, too, I did say the word grant, I know I did. So, but I apologize, I'm probably jumping ahead, but it is up to the board on what process
Okay.
we use. And I think that's what they're doing here by the change, is they're saying, they're deferring to us, to our authority and on that
Okay.
too. So I did say grant, I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
And the cost, which is what I failed to mention, is actually $4 million for 3 years, and then $3 million ongoing. And that is very practical for a legislature to say, wow, this is for how much money it's saving us every year for state licensure, and to get everyone reporting to you properly is tremendous. And that is with the amount of savings and for what the treasurer and the auditor can continue to give the input. That's, I think, a really important factor to know that can be funded.
And if I may add to that too, Chair, again, this is an estimate on what the sustainment costs will be, about $3 million. What we've experienced, though, and what we do see is, again, to my point I may try to make earlier, I'll reemphasize this, as we go through the RFP process and more go into systems, typically the licensure costs fall. So, again, I just want to make sure that everyone knows these are estimates, and I would anticipate that we probably come under these estimates rather than go over these estimates, because we're really trying to calculate over a 10-year timeframe what licensure costs will be. And again, based on the analysis, it does appear that, the more that are utilizing the systems, the licensure costs fall, so.
Board Member Belknap.
I just want to say thank you. I know that Representative Ballard really has been working on this for 2 years and has allowed everyone to have input, has allowed our office, allowed other people to have input. I appreciate the support, and I just want to be really clear that I appreciate the opportunity that we have to monitor correctly and to be able to report back to the citizens as well as the legislature of what is happening with the funding that we have. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Thank you for coming today. I have to apologize for my question because I think I might have missed something. And so I'm having a hard time understanding because you keep talking about a state licensure, but you're also talking about LEAs still being able to use the same system they're in. Please clarify for me, like, what the difference between the statewide thing is and what the
want me to do
LEAs
that?
will be doing individually.
Right, so to be clear, it's when we use the term state licensures, the state paying the cost of the licensure for the system that meets the minimum standards. Does that make sense? Because, you know, you might have, we do have certain districts that are in particular platforms right now that do meet the standards and others that don't. So as they come online, we would, this funding would be used to pay those licensure costs as long as the system meets the specific standards. Does that make sense?
So that's where the reimbursement, so the LEA is paying for their licensing?
If that's the methodology the board chooses, or we could, you know, go to a grant program. I think we would develop that more subject to the bill passing and doing all that, so.
One more follow-up. So when we set the criteria for what the system should look like, will an LEA would have the ability to choose from any system that meets that need?
Yes, ma'am.
And then we're assuming that they would save money because other LEAs would be using the same system?
That is a good assumption because, you know, again, analysis indicates that depending on how many are users of that particular system, there's a decline in the amount of the licensure costs, right? So, I mean, that's all going to come to fruition as a result of the bill passing and the board rules that Angie and I will bring forward to you for your, you know, your decision making, and that'll all come out very clear as part of that process.
Maybe let me visualize it this way, that let's say the process or the financial system A was determined by you that there were enough that would be a great statewide licensure. But LEA C decided we're on our own, we would rather take our own expenses. We don't want to be a part of what your system, what you are, the minimum requirements are. We want to do it ourselves. Correct me if I'm wrong. They would be responsible for their own licensure and their own resources, unless they wanted to opt into what a state licensure was doing. Is that correct?
That's,
yeah. So they could have the choice to still do their own as is. They could have the choice to opt in and have the state pay for the licensure, whether they were already within that capacity or needing to come up to it. But I think that's where Davis School District and Granite both, in my conversations with them, said we're happy to continue doing our own thing under this circumstance. But you can determine that in rule. But that's what this bill is anticipating, that's where the savings will come in a state licensure, but not saying, oh, good, now we're going to pay for every single licensure that happens to meet the requirements. It would be more of the group option that the LEAs could opt into, but wouldn't be forced to be in that. Is that correct?
correct. Well, and I'll also add to that if they do choose to stay in their system, they're still mandated by both the USIMS bill and this bill that that their systems and the modules within the systems have to interoperate with USIMS. So there is that piece too. So we're balancing that as well, because as you know, it's by way of this process, there was great concern and then resulting consideration of not forcing LEAs to get out of their systems, but we do it is necessary that it does interoperate with our USIM system so that we can get that real-time reporting capability no matter what system they're in. So we'll balance that aspect with existing systems and licensure costs and all that as part of the rule process should the bill pass. So.
Board Member Scott Hansen.
So maybe just to summarize for me.
Sure.
So as part of this, we'll develop as a state board some kind of a preferred vendor list, or maybe one or two, and then we'll negotiate with them for the reduced licensing costs. And if school districts want to opt in or LEAs want to opt in, they can opt in and participate at those reduced costs. Otherwise, as long as they meet the requirements, they can develop their own system or use their own legacy system.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's a good
But we
summary.
see one or two probably vendors coming as recommended vendors or preferred vendors coming from USB. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, so I would engage with your head of procurement, with Zach Christensen, and we'd follow that process that you just basically described right there to identify. I mean, we already know some vendors that are out there that LEAs are using. Maybe they don't have all the modules though quite yet, so we'll look at that. But yeah, we'd say, here's the list, you can choose not to. If you choose not to, there are some second and third level effects to that. So we're really doing a good job, I think, of balancing that local control with, getting to a standard of system capability to interoperate with USIMS, to dock with the station and live long and prosper. So,
And just
so I'm
have a
the
follow-up?
geek. I'm the
Yeah.
geek. I'm the geek. Yeah. Well, Star Trek's better than Star Wars, ma'am. So I know. Here we go. You want the debate? That's right. See? Okay. All right. Sorry, sir.
So the LEAs that will benefit most are probably the smaller LEAs that would have a low number of users because they
Well-
can opt in and get that,
Right, but if they're in a
bargain price
system
or-
that other LEAs, big or small or medium, are using, we're estimating that the licensure fees would fall because a lot of them do it, base their fee costs on the student count, right? Which is what we use for the calculation on that model district. So, I'm anticipating that. I mean, obviously I can't guarantee that, but that's the knowledge that we have, and I feel confident it'll turn out that way. And so then the estimates could even come under, of what we've done. We estimated this as if everyone would opt to do licensure and that the licensure cost would be what that model district with their system is paying right now. So, I would anticipate that we'd be able year to year to adjust the funding, but then get to the standards that are so necessary for decision-making that benefit the individual student. So.
Oh, thank you. Seems like it makes good fiscal sense.
Yeah, and I think the smaller LEAs would definitely benefit, but those who would already be in a particular licensure would now get to keep that licensure funding because the state would be paying for the licensing.
The other, if I can just dive in on this, are the vendors that are out there that are watching this ever since USIMS was funded, are eagerly anticipating this they know of your bill, they know what you're working on, and want to be part of that solution, and they're claiming they're ready now, but at the next level down within their organization, they're preparing to be ready, to have all the modules and everything. And so the vendor side of this should be very competitive because there's multiple vendors seeking and want to get a slice of this if they can make it. So all this communication, this evolution from 80 million to USIMS to now to this has been really good prep for the vendors. So it's not going to surprise them when we put an RFP out. If this is funded and everything works out and we put an RFP out, it's not going to surprise them they won't be ready because they've had all this lead time and they're presently working on this. So we've got a couple more board members. Davis.
Thanks for coming. I was just looking over the fiscal analysis, and help me remember, we went to the Hill and made a presentation about USIMS, and I remembered a $17 million price tag. Is that included in this fiscal analysis, or is this just for the outside LEAs and the 17 million is for what happens in-house?
Yeah, so the cost, the amount that is funded for USIMS helped reduce this amount, because originally we were around $80 million. Okay. So with what we know now, right, and what USIMS capabilities are, and then subject to the minimum standards for financial systems to interoperate with USIMS, the amount that the legislature so graciously gave us for USIMS helped bring this cost down, right? And again, I really anticipate that at some point you're going to come back and you're going to say, Scott, you were wrong in your calculations, but I'll be wrong because I was too high, right? I'm just trying to make sure, though, that, we just don't know how many are going to opt in, how that's going to work. So we did it as if everybody and we'd pay the licensure costs on the, what, the most optimal system is and, what that particular LEA model we use to use these calculations on, right? So I really do feel that with the amount that was funded with USIMS and, this amount is the base as we start this process, that we will actually probably save money and be able to go back to the legislature and say, okay, this year we don't need as much as we predicted on that. But I just, the other piece to this is it's so important that we have a sustainment plan, right? This is one of the mistakes that a lot of even private corporations make, is they invest so much in a system or software, but then they don't plan well for the 7 to 10 years of sustainment. So we're really trying to cover that aspect too. So more to follow when or if the bill should pass. So it's best we could do with it. So.
Board Member Bolter?
Sorry, one more. I'm just trying to understand how reimbursement will work.
Okay.
So the state board through procurement or what have you, let's say it comes up with 1 or 2 vendors
Okay.
that an LEA can opt into. So then if an LEA opts into those vendors, then they'll be reimbursed for
Right,
that
so
cost.
if say it's just as an example, say it's an LEA that has to get just really a whole new, basically a new financial information system with all those modules, right? So they would expense that, they would pay for that using unrestricted money for that, but then we would work out, if you, the board, says that that's the methodology behind this, do it. If you choose to do a grant program, though, they would apply, and then they would say, okay, we want to buy from this vendor, this is what we need to meet the minimum standards or to meet those modules that were on that one slide, then we could do it that way, but that's going to be up to you, ultimately up to you. We're doing things in order, like on a linear approach, right? So the glide path is if the bill has to pass first, we have to have the funding, then we decide, then we put into board rule what the minimum standards are, and then the board determines the methodology for how we pay for the licensure or pay for the cost of implementation and licensure.
Thank you.
So,
I'm liking
okay.
this. It's sounding like it could be a really good thing to help LEAs better with their finances.
And there's a lot of moving parts to it, so we'd obviously come to you probably through Finance Committee, and make sure that you were kept up to date on, all of the different moving pieces and parts to this.
Board Member Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Again, thanks for being here and explaining this a little further. You mentioned implementation. Is that including training costs, and what have you
Yes.
assumed for that, and what kind of time frame are you considering for that?
So if I may, Chair, the calculation that we did, we got the amount, the actual amounts that model LEA paid for training for a particular system that delivers the kind of modules. And so it does include training. It does include, whatever software, estimates again, and the calculations on that. And for implementation, but then also it also includes a factor for sustainment training as well, right? So that if the legislature were to make some other requirement and we needed to update the module or do something to accommodate that, or you, the board, made a rule, that we would incorporate that into the contracts or to the agreements with the vendors to make sure that those sustainment training costs were covered after implementation training.
And this does provide, in statute, gives you until 2023 to figure out that rulemaking of what you'd like and what you want the LEAs to meet. So that gives time for the procurement and the details that you would like to have in there.
Right, Chair, if I may, this is synchronized with the USIMS timeline, right? So right now, USIMS is heavily engaged with teacher licensing and configuration with that. So, kudos to the legislative staff that helped draft this bill, is they were very conscientious about the timing with USIMS and keeping everything in sync as far as the timeline goes, and giving us enough lead time to ensure that we really get the LEA input on this. They're going to have a lot of questions. They're going to have a lot of concerns. They always do with me. They always come to me and say, "What are you thinking?" Things, which is really good. So they'll be involved with this process as well. I'm sure I've got like 4 emails going, "What was that? What does that mean? What's live long and prosper mean?" I don't know. So it's going to be good. It would be good if the bill should pass. I mean, I can't speak for the legislature, of course.
It would make a huge difference to have your support. And I think that's why I'm here today, because if they see it's important to you, then it will be much easier for them to support. So that would make a difference.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? It'll be fun to see how this evolves. But my understanding it's got quite a bit of traction and support, especially from getting grounded with the treasurer and the auditors. So, any questions or comments? Is there a motion, or you guys want to wait till we come back to the legislative piece? What's that?
Yeah, it is.
But that's,
I think it was just information.
well, if we followed our agenda.
It's
we
just
would-
discussion.
Well, I put us on legislative policy. Maybe it would be better, so we stay, well, maybe it'll be better for us to come back to our legislative session preparation and take action on that, then we're following our agenda correctly. So thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you so much. I just want to say your role is so important in the state. I know how much time and work you put into it because my mother was involved for many years on the state board and as the chair. And so for all these decades that I've been watching your hard work, that's why we really have one of the best educational systems in the country. And so, in fact, one of the statistics we got this morning was I think we had 43% of our budget last year was appropriated to education, which is one of the highest in all the country as far as the state percentage. So we're very proud of being able to work together with you for those things.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones and Assistant Superintendent Darren Nielsen. We'll talk about the legislative audit report.
I'm trying to pull. Jeff was supposed to join us too. Grab him? Yeah. Chair, can Jeff join us as well? He was scheduled, okay. Yes, ma'am.
So will the USIMS and all the licensure information within it then be a replacement for Cactus? So we'll have all the financial
It'll
information and the
replace-
licensure information in the same system?
Sure, yeah. So it'll both replace elements of Cactus and enhance them. There are some great things in Cactus. We may not dispose of the term Cactus. It'd be a module, so to speak, of USIMS, right?
Okay.
But yes, there's replacement and enhancement of we're not going to throw things out, or that work, right? But it does need to be programmed, especially with all the changes with the licensure rules and things like that that are occurring right now. We're going to configure it and make it also adaptable. So in the future, if licensure type rules change or code changes on that, the system can adapt to that. So.
Okay, so we'll still have Cactus, but USIMS will have a major role in licensure.
Yes, because the educators will be able to log into just one login and do or even the district personnel that, code and transmit the licensure information. They log into one place, but then they'll also have access to all other components within USIMS as well. So it's
Okay,
going to be really nice.
Thank you.
Very user-friendly. Almost there. By the way, I'm in charge of IT, so.
Jared,
Come on, Jared, help me. What's the code?
Can you read the code there?
Zero two zero two.
0202? Okay. This is the. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Proceed?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay here. The purpose of this agenda item is to place in front of the board a recent audit. It was conducted by the Office of the Legislative Auditor General on public education reporting, and we concur with the findings. You see that in the management report in the backup documentation, which is actually the reporting requirements audit itself. And I'll pull that up real quick here. I already did. So what we're going to do today is, you know, I was asked, well, do we want to invite the auditors from the Legislative Auditor General to go through the report? They are just an awesome team up there, and they really do help provide us ways or recommendations on how to continually improve across the whole education enterprise. So what the purpose of this is to do is myself, Darren, and Jeff will proceed with, of course, you know, we have the response that Superintendent Dixon signed. That's a general response saying that we concur, but we want to really kind of get into the details here. Because what I hope to do, you know, we always begin with the end in mind, and what we'd like to end with is that you recognize all of the different tie-ins that are occurring here for the betterment, if you will, of our 2 or 4 our LEAs, of reducing the amount of reporting requirements or requirements as a whole by way of the processes that we're taking with USIMS, and we'll get in a little bit deeper into this, with what you're going to, with board members on the Standards and Assessment Committee are going to talk about today with the what's the assurances checklist? I should know that. The assurances checklist. So you're seeing all of the great synergy that's occurring around audits and our responses to them, and that I'll check with you at the end of this presentation to make sure that we fulfilled that goal, which is to demonstrate all the great things that we're doing to make life better and for our LEAs. So I want to start with the fact that, you know, some of the general or that was brought out is the points made that LEAs use many funding sources for administrative purposes. I do want to point out, though, too, that and, you know, Mark Peterson tracks this pretty well, too. As far as the state goes, we're one of the lowest amounts that we put the lowest amount in funding into administrative purposes. You know, that's a statistics that's out there. I'm not sure if we're the highest ranking state in that or what have you, but nevertheless, there's still a lot of funding and that's necessary to support administrative purposes because of all the reporting requirements that we have, either by way of the federal government, the legislature, board rule, and those are all pretty much displayed in here. The next thing that I want to develop a little bit more with you is that the auditors recognize, and this is found on page 3, that we have already made some efforts to make reporting more efficient. And again, that's my attempt here, so that, you know, always beginning with the end in mind, that at the end of this presentation, you'll see or experience, and as you progress into your committees and your respective committees later today, that synergetic approach with us, the auditors, and of course the LEAs and themselves, is that we're already on top of this. Because on the outside or in the margin of page 3, they say one of USB's efforts to streamline reporting is considering the digital teaching and learning grant application, just as an example, but it will still comply with state administrative rules. So all these things are being considered, and again, to benefit the LEAs so that in the end we benefit the individual student. Now, what I'd like to do is just real quick refer you to page 5, which gives you, I won't read it word for word, but they gave you the audit scope and objectives. They were asked to evaluate the total number of reports required of LEAs and determine the costs associated with these reporting requirements. So what I want to do at this point is turn it over to Darren so that he can speak to the reports that are on the program side. Then we'll also, Jeff, you can jump in and when you want too, so that you see that we do recognize there's a lot of impact to them. And then Darren will be able to express what corrective actions we're taking along those lines.
Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning, Utah State Board of Education. I want to go to page 8 on this audit and remind the board that many of your employees have come to work for you directly from LEAs. So the findings of this audit are not surprising to us as far as the number of reports that our LEAs have to complete and submit for various reasons and purposes. On page 8, the auditors who spent, I don't know, 5 or 6 months here, a team of auditors focused solely on this task. They make a statement at the end of the second to last paragraph there that I'm just going to read because it really highlights the challenge that we face, one of the challenges. It says, however, so they attempted to create this master list of reports, one list that contains all the reports that LEAs have to complete for the various programs. And again, the context, they were here, a team of them, for half a year. During this process, we noted a lack of report coordination in USB departments. However, we do believe a comprehensive reporting list can be developed given defined time frame and intensive collaboration between USB departments. So when he talks about defined time frame, this is this comprehensive list of reports seems like it should be something that should be relatively easy for us to put together. Bring some staff together, have us meet for a few times each day for a week or two. I think this highlights that it's a bigger challenge than that. So as we talk about one of the findings, there in the very next page, they highlight just a few examples: 50 special education reports, 69 child nutrition, 148 charter school board reports, and then they pull out one of our smallest districts and bring that there to the surface. One of the things that's been going on with your staff prior to this audit and concurrently through the audit is, and it started in teaching and learning here, is there's a work group that's put together who's been working on consolidating plans and recognizing that we have all these plans. There's two focuses that you have LEA plans that a district or an LEA has to complete, and then you have plans that the school level, the building principal or a committee at the school has to complete. So there's a significant number. We've focused primarily right now on the school level plans. An example of work that's been done to this point is last year when the TSSA Act was being put forward in the legislation, there was a plan, a TSSA plan associated with that. Your staff went up and met with the representatives who were bringing that bill forward and highlighted the challenge with bringing another new plan into the environment of our schools, and they were able to remove the school improvement plan and use the TSSA in place of that. Along with that, they removed a reading plan that was in statutory language. And so that's an example of a small win that's taken place already, but there's many more of those that have to take place in the coming weeks, months, and years probably as we work on this. I'm going to speak specifically on page 31 to the recommendations that are there. We recommend the State Board of Education prioritize how to consolidate individual programs. So this group of staff members, we have 8 USB staff members that are representing the different sections in this building. We have 3 representatives from LEAs who come in and meet. We have a standing appointment on a quarterly basis. And that group at our most recent meeting identified needs assessments as the part of all of these different plans. Many of them have a needs assessment that's required. So the work that we've taken on right now is to develop a consolidated comprehensive needs assessment that an LEA or school could complete rather than have to complete. There's more than 10 needs assessments depending on the programs that you're involved in right now. And it gets really confusing to a building principal as to what are we dealing with. And they don't view the school improvement effort as focused on one particular thing, but multiple things going on at the same time, which dilutes their efforts there. It talks about the board needing to select a cost-effective platform to manage that. So over the years, this board has tried to do that in a number of ways. We had the Utah Consolidated Application, or what in LEAs we called the UCA. It was a program that was designed to do this. It was available for a number of years, and it became ineffective, or maybe it was never effective. I wasn't working with it when it was first developed, but it got to where as an LEA we would commonly copy and paste from things from one year to the other and not spend the time necessary to really focus our resources on the problems at hand. That's transformed into the Utah grant system, replaced the UCA. We've also looked at a program called SPARK, that does allow for consolidated federal plans. So another complexity there is we have title programs that are federal, and then you also have the Perkins program, which is federal, and it's difficult even to get those federal programs into the same platform. You have staff that have looked at that SPARK, a solution up to date. We haven't decided to take any action as far as a recommendation with that, as we continue to examine a solution that would meet our needs for state and federal consolidation. So those are some of the things that are going on currently and will be ongoing. And then it talks about we recommend the State Board of Education work with the legislature to amend relevant statutory language. And again, that's an ongoing, ever-present issue that staff has a responsibility to monitor what's going on in the Hill and try to bring this audit actually helps us as we work with the legislative body to show that it's their own auditors have recommended consolidating and not continually putting new burdens on the LEAs. Anytime funding is available, there's typically going to be a plan and some kind of a county system that comes in place with that. So, Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about the work you've been doing?
Yes. Jeff Van Holten, Policy Advisor for the State Board. So in addition to this audit and a lot of the work that is going forward in meeting the recommendations this audit comes out with, we've also been looking at Rule 108, which is our assurances document. That is going to be before the Standards Committee again today as we look further into the elements that are within the assurances document. One of the things that we've been doing at the request of Board Member Scott Hansen, we thank you for your efforts in trying to streamline all of this together. We've been looking at first the content of the document itself. There are federal, and maybe I should preface first, the assurance document, for those who may be unfamiliar with it, we send it out every year to LEAs, and it is a forward-looking document. It is a list of essentially yes, no's, and some boxes where you can upload a link to a policy. But essentially the idea of the assurance document is, in the following school year, I assure that I promise to do the following things, yes or no. As you can imagine, we typically get all yeses. Everyone assures that they promise that they will do these things. And occasionally we have policies where they are required to upload the link for the policy in the document itself so we can, if we choose as a state board and the staff, look to see if the policy exists and is up to date. There has definitely been confusion amongst staff and even with LEAs that we've discovered as we've gone forward in investigating this document as to whether it is backwards looking or forward looking. There are some who believe this is to be a, did I do this in the school year currently ending versus I promise to do this in the school year looking forward. So those are some small interesting things we'll talk more in depth today in the Standards Committee. Well, one of the things we wanted to also look at was the forms of evidence that were being collected and whether or not these things on the assurance document are already being looked at through a different process. So are we asking for an assurance on something that we're also going to audit that another program also is following up on a staff member and an LEA for? So you have on board docs, there is a document that has a breakdown of the assurance document, each assurance, and essentially is staff here at USPE looking at that, the yes, no. Are there additional things being done in relation to external audit requirements for that same thing, or if program staff is already checking these things in addition to the assurance? And there's also a question of, are there other possible areas for evidence that we could be looking for in terms of these assurances? I will put out there that as we move forward in looking at the recommendations from this audit, we're also looking at all legal requirements in a general sense that an LEA needs to have to be compliant with the law. There are certain things on this list that have been added as a reminder to LEAs that it's a requirement. It is not a comprehensive list of every legal requirement that they have, which has been problematic in why are we making sure certain things are reminded but not other things. But the initial reason this document was created was to satisfy federal requirements that we have to get assurances on certain federal reporting and other compliance issues, and it has grown over time. So as we move forward in looking at the recommendations from this audit, and as we've been investigating this document, we are also looking at the idea of moving in the next 12 months or so in making a master list of legal requirements, which might shrink this list in terms of if the things that are on here are just for the sake of reminder, then it will exist somewhere else on a master list. But this also will continue to be required because there is some federal components that we have to assure to the federal government in order to maintain our funding from them. But that is the work that we've been doing in this particular piece of trying to make this document more meaningful, as well as less of a headache for LEAs and making sure that it's not just duplicating other efforts in other areas, which is something that really speaks to what this audit was getting at.
Questions, comments from board members? Board Member Davis?
When all is said and done in the process of streamlining and doing what we can in response to the audit, is it possible to quantify, like, we saw some quantifiable data in the audit report. Is it possible after we've gone through this whole process to see what the reduction is on the burden to the LEA and get that in some type of a quantifiable piece of data?
So I certainly think so. I think that, because as you see, it's deep in the audit, but and that's why I wanted to bring out the discussion point or the talking point related to how much they spend on administrative costs to meet the requirements or the reporting requirements for whether it's federal, state, local, all of that. What I anticipate is by a combination of consolidating the reports, eliminating those that are unnecessary, and by way of the systems that we're implementing, for example, USIMS, where we can go and just pull the data and create the report on our own, saving time for them to export and configure to, meet the current. I really believe that's where you'll see the savings. Now, does that mean, I want to be clear, I'm not advocating or saying that, that'll result in reductions in the workforce. What it will do is allow for them to reprioritize their efforts, the staff efforts towards other things, ultimately, I believe, towards classroom type, or school level support on that. So I do believe that, and we'll track the quantifiable data that says how many we reduced, and then we'll get input from the LEAs on what they ended up doing as a result of what we anticipate as savings to the burden of, all the staff time it's taking right now to meet all of the different requirements. The one key piece that I would like to point out too is with the systems, I really feel strongly that will eliminate redundancy, right? That by everybody being able to log in with one login and see everything in one big station or system, right? They can go and pull all that out, and then we, staff up here, because some might have access to Cactus where data resides, but then they don't have access to Seats where data resides. And so then, they're asking for the same data, and the LEAs are like, well, I just gave that to financial ops. Why can't you just go over, or why can't you get into that system and do that? So it will save a lot of rework as well. This process that we're taking both with systems and identification of redundancy.
Board Member Lear?
This may not be an apples. Can I ask a question? May I ask a question of
You
these
bet.
gentlemen? This may not be an apples to apples comparison, but when the board and the staff's prompting and the legislature's prompting decided to very carefully scrutinize school fee waiver reporting and compliance, the board or the office added or reassigned, what, 4 or 5 maybe-ish employees to that scrutiny, so that if we said we were going to do it, we would really do it and do it with fidelity. Is this going to require the same, and this feels like it's more, going to require more monitoring, because I think it is really pointless to spend all the work you folks are spending to identify all the assurances in the reports if we aren't going to have the capacity to carefully, persistently provide monitoring and even-handedly.
Yeah.
So that's the question.
Because we're doing the business case. Okay, so I'll answer this question, Chair. It is an apples-to-apples comparison, because you're right. I mean, we do have to have the ability to follow up. So what we've done is, and Mark Peterson came in and he says, hey, we are the lowest state in administrative costs. We still do need additional personnel to meet the requirements of the monitoring that will take place as a result of the actions that we take here. So we've been developing a business case to ask or request additional FTE so that, to Board Member Davis's point, are we going to be able to see the cost savings? I think, someone might be going, well, so you have to spend more money and add more personnel. True. However, those personnel will assist in the ability for the LEAs to reduce their manpower requirements. And then they will also hold, which if I understand your question correctly, they'll be able to come in behind and monitor all of the different changes and drill deeper down into some of the assurances that are being made and aspects like that. We're really balancing that equation by way of this business case that we're going to bring, that is going to be presented for the first time during the legislative budget requests today. That's, so if I may, just real quick, that's why I wanted to say we always begin with the end in mind, so that you're seeing the synergy that we're creating and the efforts that are being made to build efficiency with what we do at this level and reduce the burden on the LEAs at the same time.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
You bet.
So how many, I won't hold you to this, but how many FTE are you anticipating? And then will these FTE, one of the problems I've always had with these assurances is, again, similar to the fee waiver kind of discussion, is that you can check and make sure that ABC School District, FY, Z charter school has made the submissions and said yes, but have you had, there's never been the kind of deeper analysis of, have we looked at what they're assuring? Is it accurate? Is it more than just a promise? So how many employees, and then do you anticipate there'll be that deeper level analysis?
So right now, these are in the areas of teaching and learning, CTE, and student support. We're looking at 7 to 8 employees, because if you recall, over the last 2 to 4 years, we've arrived, I feel strongly, at the financial ops capability, where we've added employees in that area just for the financial ops centric, drill downs or assurances part on that. We've really spent a lot of time and effort both with systems and personnel there. So these 7 to 8 FTEs are more on the program side, because when you look at the assurances table, it's not just financial ops, it's law and licensing, it's all these things. So this latest ask will be for the 8, and I feel strongly that would give us the systems, though, too. It's not just people. The systems that we've been bringing to you, USIMS and all that, the use of those systems by these personnel will get to what right is as far as compliance monitoring and the ability to drill down in the assurances form to test, if you will, the controls that are around, whatever that assurance is being made by the LEAs without burdening the LEAs, because the systems and the personnel will be able to do that. I mean, yeah, they'd have to contact the LEAs and work with them on things, but we really feel that it'll be a professional and proactive process rather than a reactive process, because now we'll have systems and personnel that meet that capability.
And one more, just one
You
more
bet.
quick follow-up. Will these individuals also be able to provide technical assistance?
Yes. Yeah, so when we hire these individuals, we'll hire them based on experience and by way of that hiring process, it should and will, I really feel confident it will draw out their capabilities by way of their technical expertise. Darren, who sits to my right, is one of the most strongest, knowledgeable people I've ever met in education. And did you hear his opening remark? He has experience. He knows what it's like in the LEA. He comes into me and he says, hey, this doesn't make sense, right? Or you're going to do that too. These are the type of employees that we're going to seek, is this gentleman to my right.
Can't clone a Darren, though, which would be nice. Back to our Star Trek analogy.
Well, but I am building that in USIMS, ma'am, so I haven't
So
told you
maybe.
that. Okay, full disclosure, it'll have a cloning capability, No, I wish we could. Yeah, I really do. But there are others like Darren out there, and we're going to tap into the LEAs. The most benefit you can ever give to those that serve is to use those that serve to that, to bring them up here to teach and instruct and continually learn and improve. So,
Thanks. Thank you.
okay.
Board Member Scott Hansen.
Just a quick comment that kind of goes to what Carol was talking about, and maybe Jeff can talk about. In the project that he's working on, he's actually looking at the assurances that are made and what evidence is to be provided or is provided now or could be provided, trying for it not to be burdensome, but to add some depth to that assurance document so that there's something behind the check the box. And I think that's an important thing that we need to do, to maybe push our administrators to think a little bit, but also to have that next level so that we can actually benefit from that as well by looking at that and maybe seeing model policies and things like that by clicking a few links. So, and maybe Jeff can comment to that further.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yes, so that is the intent as we look at the assurance document, is to make it more meaningful and substantive, to make sure that the evidences we are collecting make sense, or if there really is no evidence. The example we'll talk about today in Standards Committee is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not really sure what evidence you can provide on a document except saying yes or no that you have done it. And there is not currently staff here that monitors whether the Pledge of Allegiance is conducted, but it is a legal requirement. So do we just leave that as a legal requirement and maybe move it to a legal requirement master list rather than an assurance document? But that's a lot of the things we'll be looking at as well, kind of streamline those things.
Any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any. Do you have any closing?
No closing remarks. That concludes our report. And I do want to just check in and say, do board members see the synergy that's occurring with the findings from the audits and then the progression we're making? And it's all in line with your strategic plan. We're really trying to make sure we get the right people and the right systems in place to benefit the individual student for years to come at your direction and under Superintendent Dixon's leadership. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. Next, we'll have our legislative session preparation. We'll go to legislative policy request first. We'll have Deputy Superintendent Rawlings come up. And board members, we have basically an hour. Let's use our time wisely. So, Angie, I think we should split this.
Yeah.
So we'll
start.
go a half hour.
Yeah, you can. Okay. Great, thank you. I'm just logging in very quickly. Deputy Superintendent of Policy, Angie Stallings, and we're going to start off by providing a little overview of the session and what's to come. And then we will talk about 5 new policy requests that staff has submitted for your consideration. And after that, we will then turn over to the fiscal prioritization and review of fiscal requests. So while I am getting logged in here, we would like to introduce our new legislative intern first. Megan Russell, can you come on up here, Megan? And I'd love for her to just, in her own words, tell you a bit about where she came from and how she came to be here with us. So, go ahead, Megan.
Good morning. My name is Megan Russell. I grew up in Sandy, Utah. Graduated from Brighton High School. And I just most recently graduated from BYU Hawaii with a bachelor's degree in political science. And I'm very excited to be here and to learn and see how things operate. So thank you for this opportunity.
And so some of you board members who started with us this year, we didn't have a legislative intern last year, but in prior sessions, we have had a legislative intern. So those of you who've been on the board for more than a year know how valuable it is to have a legislative intern. And so, you know, Megan will be here to support all of us as well as all of you, and we're really excited to have her on our team. So thanks, Megan. And so now I'll just start by giving an overview of what you can look forward to as far as information and meetings related to this session. We've already begun by producing our tracking sheet on our website. And so that, if you go into the board's website, you go into the law and policy and professional practices section, then you will see a legislative page. I'm sure as we get closer to the legislative session, we'll have a banner that it will be easily clickable from the front page on the legislative session. But there you can see on our Utah legislative session page on our board webpage, we have a tracking sheet that's available that we've already started populating. Bills are getting numbered. This is what it looks like in paper form, but it is available on our website. That's updated during the session every day with the new bills that are numbered, and before the session, it'll be approximately every 2 to 3 days until the session starts. The tracking sheet is really a great resource. I was just going to give you an example. If you go to HB 99, which is Representative Snow's Enhanced Kindergarten Amendments bill, that's one of the board's priorities, as you know, our fiscal priorities, and was a bill that staff presented on your behalf to Education Interim Committee. You can see here that bill. And so it's very easy to find out information and access those bills very quickly. Another thing, by our first legislative meeting on January 30th that we'll have available is a SharePoint app that you all will have access to that you can just put right on your phone. And it will have committee meeting dates, and it'll put the agendas right there. It's very accessible, the calendar. The tracking sheet will be on there. So this is a great resource for employees and board members. It's not quite populated right now because we have no committee meetings with times set yet. But during that first legislative board meeting, when we're up at the Capitol, if you would like, we can help you figure out how to navigate that on your phone. Otherwise, I mean, that's probably the easiest way to find out which meetings are when and what bills are be on those. And just speaking of our legislative meetings, for those of you, there's a couple of you who are new since last year, the board meets every Thursday during the session up at the Capitol in room 30 from about noon to 1:30. And during those meetings, we'll discuss different bills. We'll give an overview of kind of the top education bills. It also is an opportunity for you all, if you have a bill that you know that you would like us to be prepared to present or discuss before that Thursday meeting, feel free to reach out to Jeff or I, and we can be prepared to provide an overview of that bill and kind of set the stage for discussion. But those meetings are a time for you to be more informed, more engaged, and potentially take a position of support or to request an amendment or potentially oppose a bill if you'd like. In addition to our Thursday meetings, the first Thursday of the session in the morning, we'll have a breakfast with legislators. We send out an invite, and it's just an opportunity for legislators and board members to talk about education issues. We've done that every year for the past 4 or 5 years, and we will do that again on January 30th. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, I'll try not to take too much more time, is that the legislature has a really great tracking service. If you're interested in kind of getting real-time email messages on bills that you're very interested. So let's say HB 99, for example, is a bill that you're very interested in. You want to go to committee meetings, you want to watch the floor debates. You can come here to the tracking service. It's on the legislature's main page. If you go to bills, you'll see tracking service right there. You can enter your email in here and you can select bills that you are interested in, and the legislature's system will send you updates when that bill gets set onto a committee calendar, for example, and it's a good way to track bills that might be of most interest to you. And if you have any questions regarding how to use the website and this tracking service, Jeff is a really great resource. I am as well, but oftentimes Jeff's easier to get a hold of than I am. So that's kind of the general overview of the session before we go into the policy requests, the 5 new ones. Do any of you have any questions about just that before we move on to the 5 requests?
I'm not saying any, so please continue.
Oh, that's a good point. Michelle brings up a good reminder that during the session, we will have a shuttle that will be available on those Thursday meeting days. If you do want to come park here, and then we'll have to go in kind of phases because we usually only have one van, but you can get a ride up to the Capitol and back from our office if you want to park here instead of trying to park up at the legislature. And more details on that will come. We only do that during the session, obviously. It's because the parking's a bit of a nightmare up there. So while I am getting the policy requests up, do you want to just start by discussing one of them? Because you've got it there.
And I'll just add very quickly, with the tracking page, there's also a legislative app if you're more of a phone person like I am, and you can get live text updates of your bills as well. So you can create the login online, create your personalized tracking sheet. When you go into a bill, on the right-hand side, there'll be a Track This Bill button. And so when you log in on your phone, you'll have that list available as well, and you can get text updates, which for me is easier. In starting with legislative requests, we'll jump down to number 3. And I'll also do you all a favor and say we're not going to do number 5. Just got word that we need to pull that one for now, so we'll just do the first 4. But number 3 is unique in that it is not a legislative bill request. It is actually an appropriation request, and it is seeking your support for a different agency to get money. You might be asking, why on earth do I care about a different agency getting general fund money, by the way, not education fund money? Well, this request hopefully is familiar. Back in October, Representative Handy came and presented to you with our child nutrition staff, providing information at that time on seeking general fund money that the Department of Agriculture is going to get from the general fund. So again, this is not education fund, and this is a different agency seeking the money. The nice thing about all of this is, at the end of the day, if they are successful, they will give you the money. So that's always nice. Someone else does the work for you and takes it from a different account. So that's always great. What we're asking for today is official position of support for this request from the Department of Agriculture to seek the $275,000 to provide to us to do grants for LEAs to buy local food from local farmers here in Utah. So hopefully that rings a bell in terms of what, from the October presentation. We are looking for the official position of support from the board so that staff here can coordinate and work with and collaborate with the Department of Agriculture as they move forward on seeking this ask. So that in and of itself might even be its own separate motion, Chair, because it will be a position of support from the board from these other 3 requests that we're asking for, because the other
We can-
3 will be
we can
bills.
separate it out.
Mhm.
Board Member Belknap.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion that we support the Utah Department of Agriculture in this ask. I don't know if I need more detail than that.
Is there a second? Give it to Sean. He is fast with that hand and not on that button, but. Discussion to the motion? And the motion is to support this item number 3, the ask to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. Discussion to that motion, Board Member Earl?
Yeah, and maybe I missed it somewhere. Is there details about who is this Digital Citizenship and Wellness Commission?
That is a separate bill request. We'll get to that one in a
Okay.
moment.
I'm not seeing any other discussion on this, so let's vote on it. And the motion before the board is that we support this item number 3, request to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. So let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Please continue.
We'll jump down to number 4 now, in response to the question asked. This is actually a bill that is in process, and we have been contacted by the legislator and the associated vendors that want to work on this bill, and they want us to be at the table as well. What this is it would be a bill by Representative Stratton to create a Digital Citizenship and Wellness Commission, with the idea of a commission that would meet on a regular basis to look at the issue of digital citizenship at an education level as well as a community level. They're looking at going beyond just a K-12 environment, bringing in other state agencies that might have some type of intersection with educating the public on digital wellness and digital citizenship. So the details are very fuzzy at this point, but the idea would be that there would be a commission. We would have a seat on that commission, and they would make recommendations on a regular basis to the legislature for policy-related issues on digital citizenship and wellness.
The way I see this, it's kind of being, it is fuzzy, but it's kind of assuring a seat at the table if this moves forward.
Correct.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
I guess we wait, and if someone's going to move it forward, then we would make a comment at that time, because I would not support this without the details. So, is that the idea?
Board Member Davis?
Is there a cost?
I would imagine there will be a cost. They haven't even determined at this point which agency would staff the commission. There have been multiple agencies, ourselves included, that have been mentioned as potentials. But right now, they're trying to iron out all of the details. So the motion of support would be to allow staff to be engaged in the drafting process and to go to the meetings and whatnot so that we can kind of get more information and provide feedback.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
So I think that almost answered my question. So, because this feels almost like that last thing, are we looking for support for a bill, or are we looking for direction that allows you to help draft this bill?
The latter.
Okay.
Board Member Lear?
And just to one person's opinion, if this comes out of the general fund, I'd be completely supportive. Not so much, comes from the education fund.
I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Right now, I'm not seeing a motion of support or.
All right. Apparently, we are pulling number 5, so we won't take your time to discuss it for now. We'll bring it back to you if needed. So we'll go back to number 1 and 2. So number 1 is an amendment that is related to a recent case that you all may remember, where an educator had a relationship of a sexual nature with a student who was no longer a minor, but not at their school. So they were involved with an extracurricular activity within their district, the educator was. And so if you look at 53E-6-604, it talks about the state board investigating instances or allegations of an educator who's engaged in sexually explicit conduct with a student who is not a minor and enrolled in a school where the LEA or educator was employed, we would like to ask for that school to be changed to LEA or to say LEA or involved in an extracurricular activity that, in this instance, the educator had access to the student through like a sporting activity, and that's where the grooming took place. So that's what number one would be, is seeking an amendment to that section of code with an amendment that's similar to that.
Okay, question, I believe, or something. Board Member Lear?
And I would support this if the student is still a student. I don't support it if it's a former student. So someone would have to speculate that the grooming, defined or not, took place while the student was a public education student. So I would like to see the language in this before I would personally want to be supportive.
If you look at the sheet that's uploaded, it does still require them to be enrolled in the educator's LEA or an extracurricular program the educator's involved in. So they would be enrolled in the LEA or participating in an extracurricular program that the teacher educator is supporting. So they would be a public education student, because I don't think you could have non-district or public education students participating in those extracurricular activities, but I could be wrong. But that is the intent, is to have the nexus with, and it does say student,
And I would just, like I said, I would still feel more comfortable seeing the bill as it's written
absolutely.
than the intent. Because even when you say participate in, what if it's a volunteer coach, youth coach, or I'd want to keep I would personally want to keep that to be a narrow clarification.
Sure.
Well, it's not written yet. so
Yes,
that's
this
what we're
would
having
just
to-
be again, this is us making sure you're okay with us seeking a bill file to get it written, and then, of course, we'd bring the bill language
Correct.
back to you once it gets drafted.
And especially if it gives you more control over what the language says.
Yes.
And thank you for the backup
Okay.
sheet.
Yeah. Should I go to number 2?
Yes, please.
So the last year or so, or maybe even longer, Superintendent Jones could clarify, our staff has been working with LEA representatives on amending and clarifying our necessarily existent small schools program and funding distribution formula. And they've been working on the rule, which I believe has been moving forward. Ben Rasmussen has been working with that group along with others. And based on the work of this group, there are some elements in code that don't match our current practice. And so the bill would be to seek some amendments to statute to reflect what we'll be doing in our board rule and what our current practice is.
Any questions? Board Member Belknap?
I'd like to make a motion that we support our staff working with the legislatures on number 1 and 2 moving forward.
And 4.
Okay, that's
And
that's
4.
fine.
And 4, sorry.
And we have a
No, just
a
one.
motion and a and a.
No, I just
second.
want to do 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's what I thought you was gonna.
Yeah, 1 and 2.
Because it was gonna change.
Yeah, sorry.
Good. So let me restate the motion and see if your second's good. The motion is to approve staff to work on those legislative requests on 1 and 2. Okay, is your second still good? Board Member Marsh? Okay, discussion to the motion. Board Member Lear?
My question is, and maybe this, given that you're working on it, maybe that's self-explanatory, or should be for some of us. But do the rural superintendents who receive this NEST money also agree that there are conflicts and it would benefit by being cleaned up or straightened out or whatever you want to say?
Right, Chair, as part of the work group, there were rural superintendents that represented there. So we feel confident that, you know, everybody supports where we're at right now with it. There's still work to be done, but yeah, we were very inclusive of the work group.
And the work group is supporting to have this activity done.
Yeah,
It's
we
just-
checked with them first.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Not seeing any further discussion, so let's vote. And the motion is to have staff continue to work, or to work on our legislative proposals for our consideration, numbers 1 and 2. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Board Member Davis.
Chair, would this be an appropriate time to move that we support HB 67 as presented by
This is the time to
Representative
do it.
Ballard?
Is that your motion?
I move that we support HB 67, Local Education Agency Financial Information Systems.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And the motion is to support the House Bill 67, Local Education Agency Financial Information System. Discussion to the motion, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Does that motion assume that we would prioritize the $4 million under, like, at a number 5 type thing? Is that the assumption with the motion?
Scott?
That's a great question. So I was rehearsing this in front of the mirror this morning and woke my wife up. So, you know, this is, you know, I was thinking about this. I said, what are you going to respond to if we say we add it to priorities? You know, I think your vote enough is to support it. I think that if you want to, you can, but you know, I don't think that you necessarily need to add it per se to your list. I think just, you know, that it's in the legislative channels. Angie, your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't think we're right or wrong either way, but, you know, the vote of the board is enough for that, so, yeah.
My response would be this motion is about supporting the bill.
Yeah.
And that if you would like to make a motion to support or prioritize the fiscal request in a moment, when we talk about fiscal requests, those would be 2 separate things. But I do think that Representative Ballard, of course, would like both, and the strength in both would be stronger than one, but right now, I think your motion right now would be about supporting the bill. And then the result of that is that here on our tracking sheet, we would put, next to HB 67, we would put a support, that the board has taken a motion of support for this bill. And then it would also give staff more leeway to engage and work with Representative Ballard and other legislators as they work on this bill on the Hill.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins, did you have a follow-up? Okay. Dr. Dixon?
Just wanted to add to Angie's comment about the prioritization. I think as we get into the session every year, those of you that have been through this process will recall that things get added on, and you can spend a lot of time at each of your meetings moving everything around, but at the end of the day, as it gets closer and closer to prioritizing and there are fiscal notes attached to bills, that changes a lot through the session. So keeping a list and things that you support and having that on the list is always helpful from a visual standpoint for our legislative partners. Back in our December meeting, we were trying to get priorities to the governor's office, and you've seen that budget come out. So I think it's always important to have things on a list, but that prioritization of those as we move through the session and it gets down to the wire, because we're then called on behind the scenes to say what are the board's priorities given what we have in funding. So hope that clarifies how that plays out in real time.
And that's the other reason that we have, one of the other reasons that we have our legislative board meetings to discuss this as the evolution, the marathon takes place there up on the Hill. Board Member Earl.
Maybe this is a clarifying question. So when we vote to support a bill, and then it changes, which they often do during the legislative session, do we re-vote again? I'm trying to remember in my mind, or
We-
would we have to bring that up as a motion, or once it gets changed, we would do you know what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
just because we support something and then, I've known bills, and I'm sure you've known this too, you get behind something and then it only takes one line to go, I'm out, but how does that, just remind me, because I'm trying to remember.
On our list, we will put that you support HB 67. And then if a first substitute came out,
Okay.
we would have you relook
Okay.
at that in a legislative meeting, and then we would put first sub, second sub.
Okay, I was just trying to
So-
remember how we
Yeah.
did it, so,
We
okay.
can green light and we can put a red light on
Okay,
it
perfect.
weekly during
That's what I
that,
wanted.
during the session. And a yellow, yeah. Okay, Board Member Lear.
My comment was just pretty much an extension of Board Member Earl's comment. I feel differently about supporting Representative Ballard's bill because the staff has already been working with her. She's been good enough to consult you. And it's still very early in the process and the session, but you've been involved all along, so I feel pretty confident in supporting hers. I don't always feel comfortable in supporting very early concepts and bills because as Jenny said, if it says from the education fund, suddenly, seems a small change, but it's a big deal to me. So that's why I would personally rather see the language of bills before I support.
Okay. I'm not seeing any further discussion. The motion for the board is to support HB 67. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
That concludes the portion on policy requests, and so
I don't think we have any other, do you have any other items, loose ends here before we
can
go
I
to?
ask one question? I think based on the motion, we understood that the direction is that number 4, we do not want
It
staff.
did not have any, there was no motion on number 4.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What's the code? Chair, will you invite Del Frost up from the?
And also-
Please.
What's the code on that?
I'm trying to see it. There's no code.
Oh, so you're already connected in? Okay. No, we're good.
Cindy, do you have a, well, you have a quick, Board Member Davis?
I have a motion for this section that we're starting now.
Okay, let's get, can we get a,
I can wait.
will you turn your light back on and then I'll catch you, but I think we want to have a quick overview. Okay, we're ready.
So, again, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. Purpose of this agenda item is to continue our development of what is an iterative process leading into the legislative session. I've described to you in much detail the timeline that's related, the key deliverables, i.e., or for example, the submission to the governor's office of your budget proposal. So from last meeting to this meeting, from your December meeting to this meeting, there's been a whole bunch of different activities that have occurred that Dell is going to orient you to, including some actions that the Executive Appropriations Committee took. And then, as you all know, the governor released his budget proposal to the legislature, to the public, yesterday at around 10:30 a.m. So we're tracking that, and we're going to offer the side-by-side comparison with what you proposed as part of this agenda item. We always begin with the end in mind. The end is also, too, to facilitate, based on some of the activities that occurred in Executive Appropriations Committee, for you to pause and take and reflect on some time here to further develop your priorities, and we can accommodate that process, but we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on. So, Chair, if it pleases you and the board, I'll turn it over to Mr. Frost to catch us up or orient us to where we're at as of this date time group.
Okay, I've got to deal with this situation here.
Okay.
And so Vice Chair Brittany Cummins will, if you'll direct things to her, I'll appreciate it. I'll be right back. You can use my computer.
Chair, if I may. Good morning, members. Dale Frost, Fiscal Policy Analyst for the board. As Scott said, a lot has happened, and I'll try to hit the highlights and then answer any questions you may have. So the first big thing that happened was after the December board meeting, the Executive Appropriations Committee met, and the relevant pieces of information are on the screen. They calculated after tax reform what they deemed as available education fund revenues. And you can see there's 113 million one time, 214 million ongoing, so about 330. And that includes both public ed and higher ed, however the legislature wants to allocate those revenues. Additionally, they allocated certain adjustments into the base budget. And if as you're probably aware, the base budget is the foundation upon which budgeting for the next year works. And so it's not money that is yet appropriated, but it is very, very likely to be appropriated fairly early in the process. So for fiscal 20, there were 2 appropriation changes. One was to shore up the statewide online education program. You'll remember about that issue. And then the other is in 3 pieces. It was a motion to include student enrollment growth, which was the board's #1 priority, already in the base budget. So that is essentially included in the budget. The Public Education Subcommittee or the EAC would have to make a motion to take that back out. And so there are 3 pieces. There's a one-time piece of $5 million, and the board or the EAC chose to allocate the local revenue offsets, which are about $34 million, but only on a one-time basis. And then the fiscal 21 ongoing, and that's the student enrollment growth that number that we had talked about before. So what's important is the 2 pieces here is about $330 million total education fund revenues for both higher ed and K-12, and that enrollment growth was included in the base budget. So any questions about the EAC actions? So if I can move on to questions?
Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Yes.
I'm just in queue.
Okay. Sorry. Put your light back on. Sorry. Okay. There are no current questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so the next piece, the governor's budget was released yesterday. And so I prepared a comparison with the board's adopted budget requests, all of the requests, not just prioritized requests, and the recommendations of the governor's budget. And so I'll go through this, and then I can take questions during or after this part of the presentation. So total requests from the board are $412 million. That's all of the requests that you have reviewed and approved of at this time. What was included in the governor's budget was $230 million, $11 million of which was one-time and non-lapsing balances. So the majority and this does not include local revenue pieces, this is just education fund and general fund pieces. So breaking that out and comparing that by the categories, in the budget tracker, you can kind of see that there are significant differences in certain areas. And so I'll kind of quickly walk you through what these are, and then you'll see in the following tables the detail for this. So category 1, which includes the increase to WPU value and enrollment growth, it's essentially the same with the major difference that the governor included a 4.5% increase, where the board has supported a 6% increase in the WPU value. There are some slight differences in offsets, but that's the big difference between the 222 million and the 168. If you remember, we broke out into category 2 those budget requests that are directly aligned to the strategic plan, and only one of those requests were included in the governor's budget, which was OEK, optional, the early kindergarten, the full-day kindergarten for 40% of students. And then in category 2 or 3, which is the flow-through programs, so the program maintenance, there was funding for the teacher, the TSSP. I'm trying to remember all these acronyms here, I'm sorry. The Teacher Salary Supplement Program, the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Program, there was $2.3 million allocated there, and then $500,000 to the NEST program, the Necessarily Existent Small Schools. And then the $10.2 million in 3B, that is the Computer Science Initiative. So those were the major USBE budget requests that were included in the governor's budget. And then the governor also fully funded the request from USDB. So let me go very quickly through the next.
Let me just.
Yes, go ahead.
So let me just make sure to, so between your last meeting and this meeting, obviously revenue became more clear, right? By way of what the Executive Appropriations Committee did. So the tailoring of or what the governor's office or the governor released is in line with what was determined by Executive Appropes. I just want to, I know Dale said that, but I just want to emphasize that with you because it's going to make a difference in how we proceed here in a few minutes.
So the next slide simply shows the difference that I mentioned, the 4.5% WPU versus 6%. And one of the things we did was when we made this presentation, we reached back out of the governor's office and trying to provide full information to the board. They did want to emphasize the fact that that 4.5% is higher than the last 5 fiscal years, what was actually appropriated. The highest has been 4% since fiscal 16. It's been between 3% and 4%, though it's not clearly 6%. Enrollment growth, these are technical differences other than a few more offsets, and the offsets were ongoing from the governor's budget, unlike the legislature's. So as you can see here, optional enhanced kindergarten was the only approved budget request from category 2A. The Utah School Leadership Initiative was the other prioritized request from the list from our December meeting. Moving to category 3, in both 3A and 3B, you'll see that TSSP is fully funded, and then Beverly Taylor Sorensen is at the $2.3 million level, and that computer science is fully funded in the governor's budget. And then the USBE internal requests, none of those were included in the governor's budget. And then USDB was fully funded. So there's also this other, what else did the governor include in education beyond what were the board's requests? And these are the 5 items here. The school nutrition program, the underage drinking prevention program, these are not really program advancements or policy changes. These are simply to reflect the changes that happened in the tax reform bill, moving from the liquor tax and other funding sources to the education fund. The 3 that really are more budget items are an apprenticeship program for students experiencing intergenerational poverty, operational excellence staff for schools. This would be 1 staffer in every school district and 2 for charter schools to focus on helping improve operational, make operational improvements similar to what the governor's office has for state agencies, and I can talk to you with more detail about that. And the compensation increases, these are in line with the recommended compensation increases for other state agencies. And that's the $19 million that's outside of the governor or the USBE budget requests. So that concludes the comparisons and information sharing. We are prepared if the board wants to prioritize additional budget requests. Because enrollment growth was included, you have essentially 4 priorities that have not been included in the budget. So you may want to include a 5th, but that is up to you on how much and if you want to continue to prioritize. So we have that availability today.
And Chair, if I may, if you recall, we did scenarios based on 250, 350, 450. Now that we have the revenue amounts that are available to us, right, you know, we're really closer to the 250, 350 scenarios, right? I mean, would you agree, Dale? You know, so we're between those. So, you know, we can do that same exercise where if this, then it would result in this amount going down or up, or, you know, we can do that with you, that process with you here today. Ultimately, with the end, you know, always beginning with the end in mind, we always experience at some point during the legislative session, the legislature comes to us and says, all right, you know, here's what the revenue is, you know, what's the board's priority? So this is, again, this is an iterative process. So, you know, there's always, you know, to Board Member Earl's question about bills, right, and if they change, well, revenue availability could change, like, you know, to Superintendent Dixon's point and all that. So we will continue this iterative process with you and during your weekly meetings. You know, you meet Thursday on the Hill, every Thursday on the Hill, beginning on January 30th, so.
I'm going to go to Board Member Earl really quick for just a question. Sorry. I'm not used to this on my left, sorry. There you go.
So my question has to do with the underage drinking money that they've, you know, the tax they put on there. It's when they originally, and I don't know whether you know for sure, but when they originally put the bill forward, I'm sure they advocated, the reason why it was beneficial to put this tax on alcohol was because it would benefit the teaching of children about the alcohol prevention, abuse and such. And so I guess I'm a little confused, and I know this was what the legislature did, but why are they moving it to general fund so that it's not attached to what it was passed with? Does that make sense? It just seems to be disingenuous or something.
Member Earl, that is a great point. And it does disconnect the funding source from the program. But that was part of the tax reform changes, and it's my understanding that both the school nutrition program, and the underage drinking prevention program were to free up space in the general fund. But that would be a question that would have to go to the legislature. And the other piece I want to say about the underage drinking prevention program, we do have a business case, and that's about providing some programming in the elementary grades. That's not part of this. This was simply to move the funding source. That's a separate and distinct policy discussion that is not part of the governor's budget.
And Chair, if I may, I think we'll get more clarity when the session starts on all the different moves that occurred. I've reached out to the LFAs, and we've asked or requested that Jonathan Ball and Andrea Wilco come to your January 30th meeting and really provide more in-depth discussion on the SB 2001 changes. So, right, yeah, and so we've asked that point, or asked them to address your question as part of that, as long as the board approves putting them on your agenda for January 30th. So we're moving. We're ahead of it.
And I was just going to add, it's exactly that. The legislature just wanted to have more general fund revenue that then they can spend on other entities other than education. Okay, Board Member Cindy Davis.
Can I make a motion, Chair?
Yes.
I move that we remove the $3 million in scholarship money in the school leadership program and move the personalized learning ask into priority 5.
Is there a second? Okay, so the motion is to remove the $3 million from the $3 million scholarship ask from the leadership line, right? Sorry. And to add the individualized learning asks to priority line 5. Okay. Okay, is there any
And I'd like to speak to the motion.
Are you looking for a category number like 2A, 2B? So the individualized learning was personalized, so it was 2C, is that the one?
2C,
Okay,
yes.
2C, adding 2C to line 5 and removing from, so that was 2D.
just removing the $3 million portion of that. So leaving that where it is, but removing the $3 million portion that was specific to scholarships. Okay. Is there any discussion to that motion? Any, Board Member Belknap or Cannon, did you have questions on that motion? Or are you in line for something else? Okay, seeing no discussion on that motion, the motion before us is to remove the $3 million scholarship from the, from 2D, from the 2D request on line 4, and add to line 5 the 2C. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. Board Member Cannon?
Thank you. I always feel like it seems like every year we do this a little differently, and we're looking at different things in different orders. So I have a request, and it involves Category 3B, Flow-Through New and Expanded Program. And I would like to pass this around, please. This is a program, the University of Utah Reading Clinic. It is not a large amount of money. They're asking for $325,000 of ongoing money. And this is money that's all about literacy. The Reading Clinic was created by the legislature in '99, and it's
Board
provided
Member
services.
Cannon, are you planning on making a motion?
I am. Should I
Can you
make
make the
a-
motion
Yes.
first and then speak
My
to it?
motion would be that we move the University of Utah Reading Clinic underneath Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program for ongoing money.
I'll second that.
So, just a clarification, if you're adding it, Beverly Taylor Sorensen is currently not on our priorities list. That I understand correctly, it's on a separate list, unless you want to correct that. So go ahead.
Okay, well, so the confusion comes from where they've given us.
Okay, go ahead.
To clarify, there was 2.3 million for Beverly Taylor Sorensen, including the governor's budget.
Right.
But it is not on the list of priorities for the board. It is one of the many, the overall business cases that have been approved, but it has not yet been added to the list here.
All right, so then for board priorities number 7 and 8, could we put in the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program and underneath it, the University of Utah Reading Clinic?
And Chair, sorry to add
Yes.
one more clarification. There are actually two business cases for Beverly Taylor Sorensen. It's the only one for the same program. One is maintenance because of increases in teacher salaries. That was the $2 million piece. And then one is the statewide expansion. That's the $16 million
Okay.
piece.
So I believe I would like to have the statewide expansion because every month we come here and we see what Beverly Taylor Sorensen is doing with integrated learning and bringing the arts to our schools. They have not been able to expand. So that means that there are many students in our state that are not having the opportunity to engage in the arts and learning that Beverly Taylor Sorensen offers. So I think that's an important program, and it just breaks my heart to think that we're not willing to fund that program for other students in the state of Utah. So I'd like to see that one placed there, and then underneath it, the University of Utah Reading Clinic, which is actually a statewide program, although it carries the moniker of the University of Utah.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, so the motion before us is to place the Beverly Taylor Sorensen program, both parts, both
Yes.
requests on line 7 and the University of Utah
Both are
Reading
ongoing.
Clinic on line 8. Any discussion to that motion?
May I speak to my motion?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So I've already spoken a bit to Beverly Taylor Sorensen. But I'd like you to recognize the University of Utah Reading Clinic. So it serves the entire state. It has been in charter schools and school districts, youth in custody facilities, and they've even helped USDB. They teach teachers how to deal with students who are having a terrible time with reading. And they have been incredibly successful at doing this, particularly with students who are dyslexic. And if you think, I'm a mother of a dyslexic child, and if you think what it means to a child to have that ability to read in the world throughout their life, it's an incredible opportunity. Currently, there are 19 Title I schools waiting for help from University of Utah Reading Clinic. There are over 1,000 children on their wait list for this kind of help. So I would like to support that by prioritizing them. Thank you.
Please raise your hand if anyone on the list wants to speak to this motion. Okay. Board Member Earl?
I guess maybe you kind of answered that question. I wondered how expansive the reading program was for the whole state, so to speak, where we're making a prioritization. And that's the other, just a little bit of a concern I have, is that we're putting it up above all these others. Not that it doesn't serve, not that it doesn't do great things, but you're saying that there are entities that are on the board, are waiting in line to get on to this. What exactly does that mean, I guess, is what I'm curious. Do you, okay.
Board Member Cannon, can you please push your button and I'll get your mic on.
Invite Karen Morgan to come and respond to this question, who might do a better job than I can.
Yes. I guess I'm just wanting to know is it just Salt Lake area, or, how expansive is this, so.
Just 1 second.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. The outreach is statewide. The base clinic is located in Murray, about 5,300 southwest of the freeway interchange there. But the outreach is across the state because of a distance lab that we have located there in the base clinic. And so the clinic serves children all over the state. We have worked with teachers and students, like in Big Water, over in Monticello. There's a lot of work being done up in Ogden, in the Ogden area. There's a lot of work being done in the southern areas of the state. I don't have my list in front of me.
You're okay. I think you gave me what I needed to know. I just wanted to make sure we weren't just serving one area and putting it as one of the top priorities. So you answered that question.
Absolutely.
So
It's a
thank you.
statewide clinic.
Okay,
Thank you.
Hey, Board Member Lear?
Thanks. I wanted to support both parts of this motion, which I understood was about, again, two entities. To the reading portion, I was one who misunderstood how broad-based this service opportunity is. And when I have gradually processed this for a couple of years to understand that, I was very impressed. It also goes to my concern that teaching is rocket science, that when you're teaching gifted high school students, it's not so much, but when you're teaching non-English speaking kids on the west side of Granite District, it absolutely is. And to that point, my daughter's mother-in-law is a reading coach on the west side of Granite, and she said, is pretty politically uninvolved. We were talking over the holidays, if you do nothing else, protect that reading clinic, because it's so beneficial to the teachers that I work with and my students. As to Beverly Taylor Sorensen, I think we have really been so fortunate to have their generosity, the family's generosity, for many, many years, to the tune of millions of dollars, and we've seen the benefits of this and the expansion of it, decided to, even given the fact that we have not, as a board or as a state, we've thought, well, as long as they're giving it, why should we make it a funding priority for taxpayers? And it absolutely should be. At this point, this family has proven its focus and its willingness to serve our students, and I absolutely support both of those. Thank you.
Board Member Newell.
Yes, I want to speak to the University of Utah Reading Clinic. As we all are aware, reading is fundamental, and every aspect of education pivots off of the ability to read. And it's important that we support and expand programs like this that help students to get that foundation that allows them to be able to cognitively accept and absorb the information that comes from other aspects of education. So I just wanted to make sure that we emphasize that this is a great opportunity for us to truly impact our educational system. Thank you.
I guess I'm gonna catch up here. You have a motion or anything on the table? Okay. Okay, there is one? Yes. Okay, Board Member Belknap?
Chair, if I may clarify one piece about the motion?
You bet.
So the 16 million is the cost to expand to all elementary schools statewide. There's included in the business case a 5-year phase-in, which may be more in terms of finding all the qualified personnel to ramp up this program. That's just another option for the board to it would be a commitment to expand statewide, and in the first year, it would cost $4.5 million. That's included in the base as another option in that business case. The 16 would be to fund full expansion in 1 year, if that makes sense. And so there are just a couple options about Beverly Taylor Sorensen that the board should be aware of that are included in there for your consideration.
Okay. Board Member Belknap? What's that? Who did I delete? You. Okay. Okay. It was you? I'm sorry. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I move to split the motion.
We have a motion to split. Or second? Second. Okay.
So the current motion
Did you?
had the Beverly Taylor Sorensen.
Okay, we're gonna do 7 first, okay. So I believe the motion on the table, because it's split now. Oh, no, we didn't vote, sorry.
Chair, Chair, if I may, can
You
we just
bet.
make one more additional clarification for the board, benefit of you and the board related to the Beverly Taylor Sorensen? We think this is very important to ensure that everybody's aware of what the plan is or the programming or the funding is. So, go ahead, Jennifer. Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right, just to clarify on the Beverly Taylor Sorensen, Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. The request has a scale-up system. So to get $16 million of professionals out in schools in the arts may not be able to happen in 1 year. So in the business case, it's a 5-year scale-up plan with about 5.1 million needed on top of the 2.3 for growth to be able to kind of start scaling at a reasonable rate that we can acquire arts teachers. So it'd be great to go to 16 million. Our concern with staff would be, can we get that many teachers the first year out the gate? Probably going to be difficult, but if we know over time it's going to scale, it makes it a lot easier. So the intention for this year of priority would be 5.1 million plus the 2.3 for growth.
7.4 for the program.
So a total of 7.4 million would be what, if you choose to prioritize this, is what we would be really asking for, with the intention of this would not be the end of the path, but just the beginning of moving towards that more full amount.
Okay, well, let's do the split first. So we have a motion to split the motion into the two. Is there any discussion on the split? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, with the ayes, raise your hand for the splitting the motion. Okay, we have Board Member Marsh, Board Member Hanson, Board Member Newell, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Haynes, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Earl, Vice Chair Brittany Cummings. The motion passes, so it's split. Okay? All right, so the motion on the table is, will be to move, help me understand this, to have Beverly Taylor Sorensen, the 7.4 million, to be number 7 on the legislative ask. Okay. So that is the motion to, we're speaking to that motion. You're not wanting to speak to this one, but it'll be the next one, or?
My previous motion did not detail the amount 7.4 million. So since you detailed it in what you're presenting to the board, I'm good.
Okay. I recognize that, but I based on what they were saying here, I made that assumption, so, okay, thank you. Board Member Belknap? What's that?
She's waiting.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing any discussion to the motion, so let's vote. The motion before the board is to move Beverly Taylor Sorensen legislative, or no, the request, 7.4 million, to item to number 7 on our prioritization list. Is that correct? Yes. I was not on the, okay. Okay, so that will be number 7. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It passes. One. Were you opposed? Oh, okay, 2 opposed. Okay. The next motion is to have University of Utah, the 325,000, that right? To be moved to number 8. So to move, the motion is to move U of U reading clinic request to number 8. Got it. I've got it right up here. Okay, discussion to that motion. Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Okay. Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. All of us have programs that we love and that we want to prioritize, and I really had to write this down so I didn't forget. However, we're asking for more things and prioritizing more items than there is money available. And so if it would be okay, I'd really like to ask Dale or Scott, really, we already know that we're somewhere between 250 and 350, and yet on our list, we have 422. It doesn't add up for me, and I think we really need to think about this as a group. What is it, can we change, what can we do differently so that we're asking for items that they can really fund?
Okay, so here's a question that I anticipated in the mirror and rehearsed as well. So we've configured, and I mean that respectfully, I really do. We've configured this, we've configured this to show you that based on your priorities where you're at. So your requests right now amount to 277 million right now. So you can, your total, yes, you're spot on. All of them total 420 million, but this iterative process puts it to where, given what we know now, you're falling in right about the 277 million mark with these prioritizations. Does that help or make sense, or?
Okay, a follow-up, Board Member Belknap.
I'm sorry, I shut myself off. So we're at 277 now. However, even if we don't prioritize everything that we have,
Yeah, I see.
and all our business case plans we think are important that we don't necessarily put in our priority list, and we have them over here where the legislature can look at them, we are way over budget, correct?
Agreed.
Maybe not necessarily
With-
put them in a list
well-
of priorities.
Well, we're over, if I may, Chair, to
Yes.
Board Member Belknap's question. We're over the amount of what we know at this date time group is the available revenue by way of what EAC did. We encourage the staff to go into the session knowing that, but that there's always opportunity, there could be opportunity later on that amount might change, right, for revenue based. I don't think significantly or things like that, but that's why we go through this iterative process. Does that
I just want us to be
down?
conscious and
Yes.
aware
Yeah,
of where we're
I
sitting.
agree. I see what you're saying, so. You need to
And I,
turn the mic
I apologize, I had to step out, but I just want to weigh in too, if I just could, as we're still, the lights are still on here, and we probably have more emotion. And that is, from previous experience, it's, especially when, as the legislature's first getting going, which is really super important, is to make sure you know what your top 5 is. And then I have seen where, when we get into 6, 7, and 8, and 9, and 10, and we've got those as priorities. I also have seen where the board changes that depending on availability of funds and also where we're having support on the Hill. So I just still throw caution. All of these programs, there's people attached to all of these programs, and as we're picking and choosing our highest priority, these are funding requests, but they take it personal, that my program isn't as good as this other. So I'm just sharing that with you. So I would throw that little bit of advice there as we're drilling down into the details of, I don't know if we're going to a top 10 or whatever, but go ahead.
Chair, if I may provide just some, again, going back to the numbers that I presented, it's a really difficult question to answer how much is really available, because there are so many moving parts and pieces. So the best I can do is tell you ranges. So again, the governor allocated $230 million new funding to public ed. The legislature believes there's $330 total to the education fund. You know, what the governor did was essentially allocate $100 million to higher ed. So if that mix changes, there's more funding for public ed. There's also on the spending side to the education fund that can have some changes. For example, if some higher ed funding was towards the general fund. So how much is really available to public ed? It's really difficult to say this is the number. But 230, we have a number there. We have the number 330. That's why we don't have a $450 million scenario right now. And we don't actually have a scenario. We just have a running tally. So it's up to the board on how much you want to prioritize. I just wanted to give, again, some context.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
I'd like to move that we place early childhood grants for $3 million as priority number 7.
9.
7. So it would be in between.
sorry, I thought we-
That's okay. That it would be in between concurrent enrollment and Beverly Taylor Sorensen.
Sorry.
You're
Excuse me.
It is under category 2A, the first section, early childhood grants.
Do you have that motion? Is there a second? Second. And she's getting it up. I want to restate it. Do you want to speak to the motion, please?
Yes, please. We currently fund preschool programs, and if there's some federal funding that is going away, and so if we don't ask for this request, there are current preschool seats that will be lost. And so this isn't a growth program or expanding program. This is a let's not lose ground on a program that's been moving forward.
Okay. Let's see, we're speaking to the motion. Board Member Lear.
This is sort of to the motion, so I think the opportunity might be lost, so I'm going to take the opportunity. And that is, I think there's just as much danger in under prioritizing, because I've been interested to watch the legislature find money where it hears a strong outcry for it, suddenly $2 million to supplement the online program. I've also observed the legislature cutting, based on different legislators' own priorities, half of Beverly Taylor Sorensen. So actually getting to that $300,000+ is, in my experience, unlikely, overshooting it, because legislators do their own cutting. But I like having, at least for myself, my priorities laid out in front of them and not assuming it's a zero-sum game. That's a strong feeling I have. So I don't feel like it's just a wish list. I think it is acknowledging that, A, you can find money if you want to, legislators, and that these are my priorities, and then, until they change, obviously, but then I see you legislators, cut certain programs, but my priorities are still in place. So, to Brittany's comment, I'm torn. I think that it's very strategic, Brittany, because it's really tough to choose between early learning and reading for all. And I don't know how to vote, but that's more to the earlier comment. I'm not willing to let go of my priorities because of other strategies and games. Thanks.
Board Member Davis?
I'm in queue.
What's that?
I'm in queue for a motion.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
So my concern, not necessarily the fact we're funding this, is the fact that the federal government gives us money to do something, then pulls the money, which requires us then to fill the void. So I guess in some ways, we got to be careful what we're taking in the first place, because it will require the state to fund it down the road. Anyways, I just have concerns over doing that, or that I feel like it's it's very manipulative for a state to then pull funds that, anyways, so that's my comment.
Okay. The motion before the board is to place I'm repeating the motion so we can stay on this particular, is to replace the early childhood grant for $3 million as a priority number 7 before the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Learning Program. Okay. Janet?
Motion.
Okay.
I'd like to amend it to put it as priority number 9 rather than 7.
We have a motion to move it to 9 instead of 7. Is there a second? Second. Discussion. Do you want to speak to the motion?
I think Brittany has a good point. We don't want to see things go away. It's just, I prefer the others being a higher priority than this particular one.
Any other discussion to the proposed amendment? Seeing none, let's vote on the proposed amendment to move it as priority, motion to replace the early childhood grant for $3 million as priority number 9. Let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Will the ayes raise your hand? Board Member Cannon, Board Member Marsh, Board Member Davis, Board Member Newell, Board Member Haynes, Board Member Lear, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Bolter, Board Member Earl. Motion passes. So motion before the board is to replace, motion is to place an early childhood grant for $3 million as priority 9. Any discussion to the motion? And we're running out of time. Just bringing that to your attention on our agendas today. So not seeing any discussion to the motion, so let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. We have 1 no. Okay. 2 no's. Thank you. Okay, Bolter and Earl. Okay, the only thing standing between us and lunch is this, so. Okay, Board Member Davis.
Well,
The
trust me,
pressure's on you.
I don't want to be in. I wanted someone else to do this.
I've got to have somebody else
motion.
besides myself looking at that clock.
I'm so internally conflicted, but because I feel so strongly about fixing that student transportation problem that's gone on for years and years and years and supporting that 3-year program. But I think that we need to I move that we move the local education agency financial information systems ask to number 2 and move everything else down
Move it to what?
to number 2 and move everything else down. I just think we have to get this system in place. We have so many problems and inconsistencies right now, and we have gone asking the legislature to support this, and they've come here today, and I just think we would probably be, as much as I'm struggling, but I think we would be remiss not to do it.
Is there a second? And you spoke to the motion. You want to speak again, some more? Okay. No? Okay. Any discussion to the motion? And the motion is to move the local education agency's financial education system asked to number 2 and move everything else down the list. Discussion to the motion. Board Member Lear.
I have comment in the form of a question to Scott.
You have a question?
He's been here longer, and Mr. Frost, who's newer, but, so may I ask that?
Yeah.
How, knowing what the rural, the area folks think, and knowing how important this system's, what's the word, improvement is, which would you think is the most important priority? Just your advice.
Priority
Just your
over
opinion. Oh, of the
system or
two.
transportation?
Yeah,
or
transportation versus the USIMS improvement.
Both?
No.
Yeah. No,
Can I
well,
vote that way?
Yeah. Well, so I think there's room to, can we talk about this? Let's talk about some that I think it adds value to this discussion. I know we're pressed for time, Chair, so let Dale expand a little bit on your ask for the WPU and what impact that has on transportation. That might help answer the question too, because I think we're going to get 2 wins out of this. So go ahead.
I'm all about Steve Covey.
Joe.
One of the other points the governor's office wanted to make, because they did not include the $5 million for transportation,
Right.
Was that doesn't mean that there's zero increase for transportation in the governor's budget. So I ran the numbers, and as you know, there's a statutory goal of getting to 85% state funding of transportation costs, and we're not there. We're around 76%. So the governor's budget from, if the WPU were to increase the 4.5% and the enrollment growth, that would add $5.6 million to transportation, moving from 76 to 77%. If the USBE budget request for WPU and enrollment growth, so the 6% occurred, that would add 7.6 million and move that to 79%. If the 5 million were added to that, that's 12.6 million total to transportation to and from that would go there from all these different sources, and that would move it up to 82.9%. So
Closer to the 85.
82.9% is if these priorities went in place as they are right now.
Right.
And so hopefully that gives you a little bit of context.
Right. So I would, and I'm sure they'll, let me know, they being the rural BAs, but I would think that the transportation, it's really, that right there in itself impacts the students directly, right? I mean, yes, the systems do as well, but it's more of an indirect process to them as well. So if they were having to choose between that, I would say they would probably, however, this is why I did want Dale to expand on what an increase to the WPU means, because I think we could really actually get both within the amount that we're, given, by the legislature. I anticipate there will be an increase to the WPU, which will result in more money going towards pupil transportation, as stated by Dale. And then, there would be that ability to get at least the first $4 million of ongoing towards the systems. So I think we get a double win there. So, I can't really speak for every BA, but, I really feel that they would probably but go on the side of pupil transportation as a priority over systems. But I think they do recognize the value of both to the individual student, so.
Okay. Board Member Bolter?
So as far as the systems and the monies, isn't that part of Representative Ballard's bill?
Yeah.
That we talked, so I feel like in voting to prioritize that bill or support that bill, that we've already said that this is a priority, and so I don't know that we necessarily have to bring it there.
Yeah. Chair, if I may, that,
Yeah.
that's where, my wife finally said, go, leave, get out of here, because you're standing in front of the mirror. That's a tough, it is, you're right. It's like kind of, well, the bill's been prioritized, so then does that mean the money would, goes along with it? Angie might be able to, Angie's not here. So, she might be able to, I think through the, to me, that's a dilemma, right? So we support the bill, then do we add the money in there? If the bill passes, then, right, then the money's going to be there too. So I think you've done that, by saying that you support the bill, at least as it is right now, to Board Member Earl's point earlier. So, that's a tough one. So,
Chair, if I, at danger of contradicting my boss, which
That happens all the
Which is
time,
very
so,
dangerous,
yeah.
but shows that we're a learning organization. I would say that because of how the legislative process works, if House Bill 67
Yeah.
were approved, there will be a fiscal note that would have to go into the budgeting process.
Right.
It's not a $5,000 cost, it's a $4 million cost.
Right.
And so I do think that there is a strong argument for including it somewhere in the prioritizations.
And I'll weigh in. Does it?
No, I know. No, it's fine. It's fine.
No.
But if you do include it in the prioritizations, it's just an added emphasis on the fact that you do it. But, I just want to make sure that delineates or deducts, if you will, from the availability fund. So right, yes, yeah. So, no, I know, it's not a contradiction. It's just
No.
additional support. Yeah, no, it's all good.
Chair, may I just add one thing?
You bet.
If the bill passes, one thing to remember, once it gets through the opposite house, which in this case would be the Senate, and it gets read the second time, it gets then held on a board, even if it passed the first
Yeah.
week of the session, to see if it's going to be funded. So just because you make take a motion of support for the bill could pass policy-wise all the way through, but then be held until it gets funded. So that second motion would help it get off of the board on that last week of the session.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make
Vice Chair Brittany Cummings.
And I want to speak to the importance of us putting this on our prioritization list for our benefit as well, because if we prioritize something over here and say we want it, but we pretend like the money doesn't exist and we're watching this money add up, then I think we miss the personal honesty of how much money we are actually requesting. And so I think it's us visually seeing that we are supporting requests for a certain amount of money. And so I think it helps for us visually to add these bill priorities to our legislative budget priorities as well.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other discussion to the motion, and the motion before the board is to move the local education agency's financial education system ask to number 2 and move everything else down. So let's vote on that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. How many other? Okay, we have Janet, Board Member Lear, Board Member Gravitt. So the motion passes. We are out of time. We can certainly pick this up in our next.
Right, it's an iterative process, so,
let's keep.
I think Angie and I are on tracking that we'll continue this agenda item as you meet on the Thursday meetings and keep it going, okay? Okay.
Thank you. This concludes this portion of our day, but it ends our board meeting. We have another board meeting starting in 22 minutes, right back in here. So enjoy your lunch.